People, your next witness. Portion.
The people call Keith Davidson.
Remain standing. Raise your right hand and face the clerk. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are going to give before this court and jury shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you so swear or affirm?
I do.
Have a seat. State your full name, spelling your last name.
Keith Davidson, Davidson.
Your county of residence.
Los Angeles County, California.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Davidson.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us how old you are?
53.
Are you married?
Yes.
How long have you been married?
25 years.
Do you have any children?
Yes.
How many children?
2.
A school age, college age, adult children?
College age.
Can you please describe for the jury your educational background?
I graduated from Boston College. My undergraduate, I went to Whittier Law School.
Where is Whittier Law School?
It's in Los Angeles, California.
Are you currently employed?
Yes.
By whom?
My law firm that I own.
What is the name of the law firm that you own?
Davidson and Associates.
Where very generally is that law firm located?
Los Angeles, California.
Do you have a specialty?
Civil litigation.
Any particular types of civil litigation?
A lot of injury cases, mediation cases.
Any sexual abuse cases?
Yes.
During the period from 2015 to 2017, did you have a particular specialty?
At that time, my practice was heavily involved with media cases.
You said media cases?
Yes.
Did you frequently work on, as part of those media cases, non-disclosure agreements?
Yes.
And can you briefly describe for the jury what is a non-disclosure agreement?
It's an agreement between two people or entities where certain subjects are agreed, or there is an agreement between the parties not to discuss certain subjects.
And during that period from 2015 to 2017, were some of your clients in those cases individuals who often appeared in tabloid magazines?
On occasion, yes.
During that same period, from 2015 to 2017, I am only asking for the last 4 digits, please, of your work cell phone number.
5,361.
The last 4 digits of your office phone number.
5,444.
Is that a landline?
Yes.
During that same period, what was your business email address domain? Do you understand what I mean by that?
I do. It was kmdlaw.com.
So you had an email address, some form of your name, at kmdlaw.com?
Yes.
And what does KMD Law stand for?
It's my initials, Keith Michael Davidson.
Are you here pursuant to a subpoena?
I am.
Did you testify in this case in the grand jury?
I did.
As a result of that testimony, were you given automatic immunity for the transactions about which you gave testimony?
Pursuant to New York law, I didn't seek immunity.
That was my next question.
So yes, you did get immunity, but no, you did not seek it. Correct.
And is it your understanding, I think you just said this, that immunity is granted as a matter of law in the state of New York for witnesses who testified in the grand jury?
True.
Notwithstanding the fact that you were given immunity for your testimony, you did understand if you testified falsely then, or if you testify falsely now, you could still be prosecuted for perjury. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you know or do you know somebody named Gina Rodriguez?
Ito.
Can you explain to the jury who is Gina Rodriguez?
Gina Rodriguez is a talent manager in Los Angeles. She manages talent, and really I think the majority of her clients are reality-type talent.
When you say reality-type talent, you are talking about reality television?
Yes.
How do you know Gina Rodriguez?
I can't recall. I have known Gina for well over 10 years.
And withdrawn, have you at times during your relationship represented Gina Davidson in certain matters?
I have represented Gina Rodriguez in certain matters.
Did I say Gina Davidson?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you for clarifying. How about Dylan Howard? Are you familiar with somebody named Dylan Howard?
I am.
Can you tell us who that is?
Dylan Howard was the former content editor, I believe, or the chief content officer of American Media, Inc.
How do you know him?
I knew him in my professional dealings.
About how long would you say you have known Dylan Howard?
Well over 10 years.
Now, directing your attention specifically to the period around 2015 to 2017, can you describe a little bit the nature of your relationship with Dylan Howard?
We were professional acquaintances and friends.
And when you say a portion of your relationship involved a professional acquaintance, what kind of business dealings did you have with Dylan Howard at that time?
On occasion, my clients would end up in tabloid media and they would call me for comment. Or my clients would regrettably end up in tabloid media and they would call me to address their presence in the tabloids.
And did you ever, at your client's request, negotiate the sale of certain stories to tabloids?
Rarely.
That was rarely, you said?
Rarely, yes.
During that period, again, from 2015 to 2017, approximately how often did you and Mr. Howard speak either on personal or professional capacity?
Quite often, several times a week.
Are you still in touch with Dylan Howard?
Somewhat.
Are you familiar with someone named David Pecker?
Yes.
Who is he?
He was Dylan's boss and I believe CEO of American Media, Inc.
Did you have a lot of interaction with David Pecker himself?
Very little.
When you say very little, in the years 2015 to 2017, roughly how many times would you say you have interacted with David Pecker in any capacity?
I think in my life I've only interacted with him 3, maybe 4 times.
Are you familiar with someone named Michael Cohen?
Yes.
We as Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen is the former attorney for Donald Trump.
And how did you come to meet Michael Cohen?
In approximately 2011, there was an article that was published in a blog that involved my client and Donald Trump, and I had the occasion to have a conversation with Michael Cohen relating to that blog posting.
We'll get back to that. Who was your client at the time that led you to interact with Michael Cohen on behalf of Donald Trump?
Stephanie Clifford, otherwise known as Stormy Daniels.
Now, during that period from 2015 to 2017, did you at times use encrypted apps, encrypted phone apps to communicate with Michael Cohen?
Ultimately, on occasion, yes.
Do you remember which apps you used?
Not particularly.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, please, to take a look at a thumb drive. I'm going to ask you if you recognize it.
Edo.
How do you recognize it?
My initials are on it.
Is the date that you examined it also on there?
Yes.
What date is that?
Today's April 30th.
Did you briefly have the opportunity to examine the contents of that drive?
I did.
Does the drive contain various business records, including emails, notes, and client statements?
Yes.
As part of your job at Davidson and Associates, do you make and keep business records?
Yes.
Do you send, receive, and store work-related emails and email attachments?
Yes.
Where are they stored?
Within our servers, our computer servers.
And does this range of exhibits contain a series of emails and attachments between yourself and Michael Cohen from 2016?
Yes.
Are they exact copies of emails and attachments that you sent and received?
They are.
Has the substance of these emails been altered in any way?
No.
Do the date and timestamp contained on the emails accurately reflect the times the messages were sent and received?
Yes.
Are the emails and attachments drafted, sent, received, and kept in the regular and ordinary course of your law firm's business?
Yes.
Is that also true for the other types of records you discussed? The non-disclosure agreement, the client statements? Are they also made in the regular and ordinary course of your business?
Yes.
Is it part of the business of Davidson and Associates to make and keep these types of records and emails?
Yes.
Are the emails and attachments drafted, sent, received, and kept at or close to the time of the transactions or events to which they relate?
Yes.
And is that also true for the other types of documents on that thumb drive?
It is.
Is the person or persons who make the documents under a business duty to do so accurately?
Yes.
Are you a custodian of your law firm's business records?
Tam.
Did you produce each of the records? I am speaking specifically of People's Exhibits 276 through 286. Are each of those records produced by you pursuant to a subpoena by the New York County District Attorney's Office?
They were produced pursuant to a subpoena.
Did you also get a chance to review Exhibits 62 through 63 on that same thumb drive?
Yes, I did.
Are those also a series of emails and attachments between yourself and Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Are those emails sent and received in the ordinary course of your firm's business?
Yes.
Do these exhibits, 62 through 65 range, are they exact copies of emails and attachments that you sent and received back and forth with Michael Cohen back in 2016?
They are.
And has the substance of those emails been altered in any way?
No.
Do the date and timestamps contained on those emails accurately reflect the times the text messages were sent and received?
Yes.
I offer into evidence People's Exhibits 276 through 286, as well as People's 62 through 65.
No objection.
People's 276 through 286 and 62 through 65 are received into evidence.
Do you know somebody named Karen McDougal?
I do.
In what context?
She was a client of mine.
Do you remember how you came to meet her or be introduced to her?
I met her probably 25 years ago. She was dating a friend of mine.
Okay, and in the summer of 2016, did you represent her?
Yes.
In what capacity?
I represented her in order to provide advice and counsel as to what her rights and obligations would be regarding a personal interaction she had.
With whom?
With Donald Trump.
And do you know approximately when it was that she became your client?
Not offhand.
And do you know how it was that she became your client?
Yes.
Can you tell us, please?
Her former brother-in-law was a client of mine, and her former brother-in-law, by the name of J. Gradina, made the introduction or the reintroduction between Karen and I.
So I am now showing you People's 279 in evidence. It's in evidence. It can be displayed to everyone. I'm going to ask you when it pops up if you recognize this document.
I do.
What is it?
This is an email from me to Karen McDougal with the CCC to J. Gradina, thanking her for the conversation of that day, June 15th, 2016.
And does the email also contain an attachment?
It does, yes. The attachment is a retainer agreement between me and my law firm and Karen.
Is it fair to say you are sending her a blank retainer agreement?
I am sending her a signature-ready retainer agreement for her signature.
Got it. When I say blank, I mean her signature line was blank. You were sending it to her for that purpose, is that right?
For execution.
Got it. I believe you told us the date of the email was June 15th, 2016.
Yes.
So I want to show you page 2 of this exhibit. Is this the first page of your retainer agreement?
Yes.
I am going to ask that we blow up paragraph 2. I am going to ask you to read that for us.
Paragraph 2. Scope of service. Client is hiring attorney to represent client in the matter of client's claims against Donald Trump and/or assisting client in negotiating a confidential agreement and other live rights related to actions with Donald Trump and/or negotiating an assignment with exclusive press opportunities regarding the same.
Can you translate that for us?
I was to provide legal services to Karen McDougal and provide advice and counsel to her surrounding a personal interaction she had allegedly had with Donald Trump.
And is one of the ways in which withdrawn. This paragraph is entitled Scope of Services, correct?
Yes.
Does one of the contemplated services include, potentially, negotiating the assignment of exclusive press opportunities regarding her interaction with Mr. Trump?
That's true.
What does that mean, negotiating the assignment of exclusive press opportunities?
At that time, in mid-2010s or so, media outlets, both traditional and tabloid, would oftentimes enter into exclusive arrangements where someone would provide an exclusive content to that media outlet in exchange for money.
And did you wrote this retainer agreement, correct?
I believe so.
And did you contemplate withdrawn? Did you discuss with Ms. McDougal the fact that you were authorized to negotiate on her behalf in dealing with various media outlets?
I can't and won't discuss what I discussed with Ms. McDougal. I think that the paragraph speaks for itself.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. So let me ask the question a different way. Did you interpret this agreement as authorizing you to interact and negotiate with media companies on your client's behalf?
Yes.
Thank you. So directing your attention to June of 2016, did there come a time when you reached out to Dylan Howard regarding the potential Karen McDougal story?
Yes.
Did you do this behind your client's back?
No.
Did you reveal client confidences when you spoke with Mr. Howard?
No.
I'm going to show you what is already in evidence and can be displayed to everyone as People's Exhibit 176.
Whereupon People's Exhibits are shown on the screens throughout the following testimony.
I'm going to ask you if you recognize this series of messages to be text between yourself and Dylan Howard from the year 2016.
I do.
Have you had a chance to review the substance of these texts?
I have.
And are the texts that appear on this exhibit the exact texts you sent and received to and from Dylan Howard?
They are.
Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of the date and timestamps?
I do not.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we blow up the last 2 text boxes. I mean the last column, the first 2 boxes in the last column, lines 111 through 112. Let me ask you first, can you tell what time zone the date and timestamp is in?
I think it's UTC.
Are you familiar with the relationship between UTC time and, let's say, West Coast time or East Coast time?
Not particularly.
But these texts are dated particularly in UTC time, is that right?
Yes.
What is the date on this first text?
June 7th.
And who is the first text in this chain from?
It's from me.
To whom?
Dylan Howard.
What is the body of the text?
I have a blockbuster Trump story.
What did you mean by that?
Sort of an entree or teaser to Dylan to let him know that I had perhaps an opportunity for him.
And what was the generally speaking, and certainly without revealing client confidences, what was the opportunity about which you were contacting him?
Regarding the interaction between Karen McDougal and Donald Trump.
What did Mr. Howard say, if anything, in response?
Talk first thing. I will get you more than anyone for it. You know why.
What do you understand talk first thing to mean?
That he would call me in the morning.
What did you understand the rest of the text to mean?
That. I don't know if I had a clear understanding at that time, but I knew that Dylan's boss, David Pecker, and Mr. Trump were longtime friends and had a former business relationship, that Mr. Pecker published Trump magazine, and that at the time AMI had announced, they hadn't announced explicitly, at least impliedly, that they had endorsed Mr. Trump's candidacy.
So Mr. Howard said, "Talk first thing." Did you in fact speak with Mr. Howard the following morning?
I can't recall.
Well, did you continue to text back and forth with him about the Karen McDougal story?
Yes.
During the course of those text messages, were there also times when you spoke with him on the phone?
Yes.
Oh, the date, October 26, 2016.
You would like me to read these texts?
Please, and tell us who each one is from as you're doing that.
From Dylan. Did he cheat on Melania?
Who did you understand he to be referring to?
Donald Trump.
Okay, next text. From whom?
From Dylan.
Okay.
Do you know if the affair was during his marriage to Melania?
Again, do you understand his to be a reference to Donald Trump?
Yes.
And how did you respond to this text?
I really cannot say yet, sorry.
Is that because you didn't know or because you weren't to discuss the details at that point?
It was because it was the latter, because I was not to discuss the details at that point.
And how did Mr. Howard respond?
Okay, keep me informed.
Now, in connection with your representation of Karen, did you arrange a meeting between Karen McDougal and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
And were others present as well for that meeting?
Yes.
Who was present for that meeting?
Jay Gradina was present, and a man by the name of Johnny Crawford was present, and Ms. McDougal.
Who is John Crawford?
He was a friend of Karen's. I think a former police officer in Phoenix, Arizona.
Where did this meeting take place?
In my office.
Do you remember the date that the meeting took place?
Not offhand.
Were you present for the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if some more texts in this chain can help refresh your recollection. Switch to page 2, line 11, 11140. Do you see this text here?
Yes.
And can you tell what date that was sent on?
June 20th, 2016.
What is the substance of the text?
This is from Dylan Howard. Landed en route to your office.
So, does that refresh your recollection about what date the meeting took place between yourself, Dylan Howard, Karen McDougal, and her friend?
Yes.
What was discussed during this meeting?
The subject of the retention agreement between Karen and I. The personal attraction that Karen had with Donald Trump.
Given the presence of others at this meeting, do you believe that the contents of what Ms. McDougal said was privileged?
No.
So, can you tell us the substance of what Ms. McDougal said about the nature of her interactions with Mr. Trump during this meeting?
I can summarize it.
That's fine.
Ms. McDougal alleged that she had had a romantic affair with Donald Trump some years prior.
And withdrawn when you say romantic, does that include sexual?
That's what she expressed.
And do you know how long that romantic and sexual affair lasted, withdrawn? As a result of what Ms. McDougal said in that meeting, which was non-privileged, do you know how long that affair lasted for, or how long she said it lasted for?
I can't recall specifically. It was several weeks to months, if not more. I can't recall specifically.
Okay. Now, generally speaking, Mr. Davidson, what was the purpose of this meeting between your client and Dylan Howard?
I was sort of a proffer session where Ms. McDougal would, under agreement that nothing was to be published, where Ms. McDougal would tell her story to Dylan Howard on behalf of AMI, so that Dylan could gauge interest in the story, whether or not AMI did or did not have interest in this story.
Now, did the meeting result in an immediate deal with AMI?
No, it did not.
How did you leave it with Dylan Howard?
Dylan wanted to return to New York, run it up the flagpole, and stated that he would get back to me.
When you say run it up the flagpole, who, to your knowledge, was higher at AMI, higher than Dylan Howard?
It's my understanding that the only one higher than Dylan Howard at AMI was David Pecker.
So, very generally speaking, in the weeks that followed, what happened after that?
I think Dylan, the first entree, if you will, was that Dylan stated that AMI was not interested at that time because Karen McDougal lacked documentary evidence of the interaction.
So, how did you leave it?
I think we just said we would keep in touch.
Okay, so let me show you some more of these texts, and I'll blow up page 4, lines 11116 and 67. I'm going to ask you again to read us these texts and tell us who sent them.
This is June 27th from me to Dylan Howard. It's a story, misspelling, but a story that should be told.
Just to clarify for the record, the body of the text actually says, "It's a story Hat should be told." You're saying that's a typo, and it should be, "It's a story that should be told"?
Yes, correct.
How withdrawn? What story were you referring to?
The interaction between Ms. McDougal and Mr. Trump.
How did Dylan Howard respond?
I agree.
Now, moving to some later texts on this page, we'll blow them up. Lines 11227 through 31. I'll ask you first of all, what is the date of this particular exchange?
June 21st.
You sure about that month?
July 21st.
So it had been some time at this Poe?
That's right.
What, who sent what and when?
This is from Dylan Howard. Let's talk DT/Ross tomorrow. I think this is the entree for me to go back to them.
To reiterate, Mr. Davidson, during this period, the more than a month had passed since your June 20th meeting with Dylan Howard and your client and the others in your offices. Were you in phone communication with Dylan Howard as well during this time?
Yes.
And so, first of all, I'm going to ask you, what did you understand it to mean when Dylan Howard wrote, "Let's talk DT/Ross tomorrow"? Who's DT? What's DT?
My understanding was it was Donald Trump.
What's Ross?
Ross was a man named Brian Ross. I think he was a broadcaster, a news broadcaster. And I think he was at the time heavily investigating for reporting for ABC News.
Is it fair to say, during this period of time, you were also negotiating with ABC News on Karen McDougal's behalf?
That's true.
Had they expressed interest in acquiring Karen McDougal's story?
Yes.
When Dylan Howard wrote, "I think this is the entree for me to go back to them," who did you understand Dylan Howard would be going back to?
Certainly David Pecker. I don't know if I had an understanding or if I read the text that there was anyone other than Pecker at the time.
That's fine. How did you respond to that?
Better be quick.
What did you mean by that?
At the time, as is often the case with negotiations, I was trying to play two entities off of each other.
And what's the objective?
To create a sense of urgency, if you will.
And withdrawn. Is there anything wrong with that?
No.
Can you explain why not?
I don't understand your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. You've been a lawyer for how long?
24 years.
Is there anything wrong with a lawyer negotiating on behalf of their client to get the best possible deal for their client?
I think that's our duty.
And did you view it as your duty to try to get the best deal you could for your client at the time?
Yes.
Whether that deal was from AMI or from ABC or from somewhere else?
Correct.
So, do I understand you correctly to be saying that when you said, "better be quick," you were trying to convey that there was some urgency and that Dylan Howard should act quickly?
That's fair.
Okay, keep going, please.
This is from me to Dylan Howard. Will do.
What did Dylan Howard say?
I know.
Did he say anything else?
I emailed and said we need to talk urgently.
What do you understand that to mean? Who had Dylan Howard emailed?
Perhaps David Pecker.
Okay. So directing your attention to the last blown-up line on page 4, is this another exchange between you and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
And who wrote this?
This is from Dylan Howard. No, this is from me.
On what day?
July 22nd.
And what's the body of the email, or the body of the text?
Don't forget about Cohen. Time is of the essence. The girl is being cornered. The girl is being cornered by the estrogen mafia.
So who is Cohen in this email?
Michael Cohen.
And what did you mean by time is of the essence? The same as the better be quick email or text from earlier?
Yeah, I think at the time Karen was sort of teetering. She was about to enter into a deal with ABC.
And what did you mean by the girl is being cornered by the estrogen mafia?
It's a very unfortunate, regrettable text I sent. That phrase is not one that I used or came up with. That term, I think, by one of Karen's associates that was at that first meeting. There was several women who were, leaning on Karen to sign the deal with ABC.
So, taken as a whole, is this text another effort to spur Dylan Howard into action?
Yes.
Okay, so, turning to page 5 of the exhibit and directing your attention to some of the lines between 250 and 273, I'm going to ask you first, what day is this exchange?
July 22nd.
So same day as the last text?
Yes.
So how did Dylan Howard answer your text?
Yep, I plugged a call in. We will have news by Monday.
What did you understand that to mean?
That they would have an offer for Karen on Monday.
The following day, July 23rd, do you see another communication from Dylan Howard?
Yes.
What does that text say?
He says, get me a price on McDougal, all in. Consulting gig perhaps as a fitness expert thrown into the mix.
What did you understand that to mean from Dylan Howard?
Karen had expressed at that initial meeting had 3 goals that she wanted to accomplish. And I think he was trying to address each of those goals in order to persuade her that AMI was the right avenue for her to use.
What were the 3 goals?
To rejuvenate her career, 1. To make money, 2. And 3, to avoid telling a story and being termed the Scarlet Letter, becoming the Scarlet Letter, the, quote, other woman.
So if possible, Ms. McDougal did not want to have to tell her story?
She did not want to tell her story.
Now, the ABC deal that you were also working on her behalf, would that have required her to tell her story?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you about client confidences, so I'll just ask you this. Is it your understanding that one of the more attractive aspects of the AMI deal was that she might not actually have to tell that story, or she wouldn't have to tell her story?
Well, that was one of her stated goals. and that would be in alignment with one of her very important stated goals.
So Mr. Howard says, get me a price, all in, etc. How do you respond?
It's a negotiation, and so I started high and threw out $1 million. I said, how about $1 million now and $75,000 a year for the next 2 years as a fitness correspondent for AMI and your related publications.
So you almost translated that text a little bit as you read it, right? The number 1M you read as 1 million, is that correct?
Would you like me to read it?
That's fine. 1M is 1 million.
Yes.
And 75K is 75,000?
Yes.
I know this sounds silly, but is shorthand for the words you are.
Yes.
And pubs is short for publications?
Yes.
How did Dylan Howard respond?
I'll take it to them, but thinking it's more hundreds than millions.
What did you understand that to mean?
That was, I should expect a counteroffer that was substantially less than $1 million.
Okay, and how did you respond to that?
800,000 now, and 100,000 per year for 2 years for a total of 1 million.
Again, just to make a clear record, I'm sorry I have to do that each time. 800 inches means 800,000. 100 means 100,000, and 1M means 1 million.
Yes.
How did Mr. Howard respond?
Leave with me.
How did you take that?
That we really weren't in the same ballpark.
Okay, so next page, lines 280 through 282. I'll ask you to, first, tell us what is the date that exchange takes place on.
July 28th.
Okay, and what do the texts say? Start with the first one you sent back.
This is from Dylan. We are going to lay it on thick for her.
What did you understand that to mean?
I think at this point in time, Karen was teetering between two competing deals, and we had requested a meeting where each entity could make a pitch as to why they were the correct avenue for Karen.
Okay, and how did you respond to that?
Good. Throw in an ambassadorship for me. I'm thinking the Isle of Man.
What did you mean by that, Mr. Davidson?
Was sort of in jest, but it was just a joke.
So what Tim trying to think about how to phrase this question? Why was that a joke? Why was that funny? What was going on in your mind when you made that joke?
Well, I don't even think the Isle of Man is a country.
Laughs.
And I know they don't have an ambassador, but I think it was a reference to Mr. Trump's candidacy.
Can you just explain that a little bit more?
That somehow if Karen did this deal with AMI, that it would help Donald Trump's candidacy.
And at the time that you sent that text in jest, did you understand that AMI was working with then-candidate Trump regarding your client?
I don't know about that. I don't know that I had specific information that they were or not working with him. I knew that they had announced their support for Mr. True, but I don't know that they were working with him.
Okay. Is it safe to assume from your joke that you had an understanding that if you were to close your deal, this would somehow benefit the candidate, Donald Trump?
Yes.
So I want to turn your attention to page 6, the next few lines, 292 to 293. I'll ask you, what is the date of these?
July 28th.
Yes, I'm sorry, July 28th. That's right. Go ahead.
This was from Dylan Howard. She'll get more out of a deal with AMI than ABC, and I'm happy to sign some sort of agreement that alleviates some fears about jurisdiction/meeting only with AMI.
That's a text from Dylan. That means Dylan Howard, correct?
Yes.
What did you understand that to mean?
I understand the first part, the first sentence. I'm not so sure I understand the second sentence.
Okay, well tell us about the part you do understand.
She'll get more out of a deal with AMI than ABC. I think that's self-explanatory. And Dylan was making his case why they were the right avenue for Karen to choose.
Okay, how did you respond?
I need this to happen.
Now, Mr. Davidson, based on non-privileged communications to which you were privy, why did you need this to happen? Why did Karen McDougal prefer the AMI deal to the ABC deal?
Because she, at that time, based on non-privileged information, she had announced her desire to not tell the story about her interaction with Donald Trump.
So that withdrawn? Part of the allure of the AMI deal was that she wouldn't have to. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
I am showing you now People's 280 in evidence. I'm going to ask you if you recognize this.
I do.
What is it?
It's a meeting invitation, a Zoom invitation from me to Jay Gradina, Karen McDougal, and Dylan Howard.
You said Zoom. Is it a video conference? Is Ring Central a video conferencing platform much like Zoom?
Yes.
Who did you invite? You just told us. Did this meeting in fact take place on this day?
I believe it definitely took place. I assume it took place this day.
The date of the invite was August 2nd, 2016.
Yes.
Is this too good time to break?
Jurors, let's take our recess for lunch. I remind you, please do not discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Keep an open mind as to the defendant's guilt or please do not express or form an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Please remember all of my other admonitions. Just put the case out of your mind. Enjoy your lunch.
All rise, whereupon the jurors and the alternate jurors are excused.
Thank you, sir. You can step down. See you at 3.
Whereupon a luncheon recess is taken. Whereupon the case is recalled in the afternoon session. Continuing case on trial. People v. Donald J. Trump. All parties are present.
Good afternoon. Should we get the witness?
Sure.
Let's get the witness, please.
Witness entering.
I remind you, you're under oath. Let's get the jury, please.
All rise, jury entering. Whereupon the jurors and the alternate jurors are present and properly seated. Continuing case on trial. People v. Donald J. Trump. All parties and all jurors are present.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Howard. I just want to put, that's the second time. Good afternoon, Mr. Davidson. I want to show you part of a text exchange we were looking at before lunch. This is from People's 176.
Lines, page 6, lines 292 to 293.
So that last text that's sent on July 29th at 2:24 a.m. UTC time, is that text to you from Dylan Howard or the other way around?
It's from Dylan Howard to me.
And so when Dylan Howard said, I need this to happen, how did you interpret that?
I don't know. I suppose I interpreted it that he wanted it to happen.
You mean it being the deal with Karen McDougal and AMI?
Yes, sir.
Okay, continuing on with this exhibit to the next page, page 7, I'm going to blow up lines 314 to 319. Again, I'll ask you to give us the date, the to and the from, and the substance of these emails, texts.
You want me to read right through all of them?
Sure. Start with the date and time of the first one, please.
This is August 2nd, Rami to Dylan Howard. I can't believe they are asking me to go back to you for another 25, but they are. He deal is accepted at 150. Can you do that?
Couple of questions about that. First of all, does 25 inches mean 25,000?
Yes.
And he deal, should that read the deal?
Yes.
Who was asking you to go back for another 25,000?
Would be Mr. Gardina and Karen McDougal.
And how did Dylan Howard respond?
He just called me. F it, not my money, I'll ask.
When you said F it, is the full word written out in the text?
Yes.
What did you understand that to mean?
That someone just called him, and that he didn't care about money because it wasn't his. He would run it up the flagpole.
He didn't care about money. He would run it up the flagpole. You're referring to Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Okay, the next text, please. Who is that from?
From me to Dylan. Let's try and wrap up Karen's deal. She is getting repeated phone calls from Rhonda Schwartz.
What did you mean by that?
That the deal was getting stale. It had been left on the counter for a bit, and if he wanted to close it up, now was the time.
Who is Rhonda Schwartz?
Rhonda was with the investigation department at ABC News. She works or worked for Brian Ross.
Okay, how did he respond?
Dylan responded, "We are figuring out the mechanics of the deal already."
What did you understand that to mean?
Gus, that they were figuring out how to paper the deal.
Paper the deal between Karen McDougal and AMI?
Yes.
Did he add something after that?
Right now, I mean.
Did you respond?
I responded, got it.
Okay. Also, on page 7, lines 320 and 321, what is the date of this exchange?
August 5th, 2016.
And who sent the first text in this blown-up portion of this exchange?
Dylan Howard to me. Cameron's. Excuse me, this is August 5th, 2016. It's from me to Dylan.
Okay, what did you say?
Cameron's agreement wasn't really even close to what we were expecting. Please review the red line I just sent. Need to handle this quickly.
First of all, who is Cameron?
Cameron Straker is general counsel for AMI.
What is a red line?
A red line is just modifications or corrections to an editable document that's like it's a step along the way in modifying a document.
So what did you mean when you said that his agreement wasn't close to what you were expecting?
We had come to terms by this point with AMI on the deal points, and there was a short-form agreement, or at least deal points, and that was negotiated between Dylan and I. And then Dylan, as a content editor, handed it off to the legal department at AMI Cameron. And when the short-form agreement or the deal points morphed into the long-form agreement with Cameron, they didn't jive.
So do I understand you correctly to be saying that Cameron had sent you a contract, and it did not match your understanding of what you thought the deal was that had been negotiated between yourself and Mr. Howard?
Correct.
So, when you refer to the red line, does that mean you made proposed changes to the contract they had sent over and sent it back?
I believe so. But the red lines were either extremely extensive, I mean it was difficult to redline something that didn't even closely resemble, I believe to my recollection, the deal points that we came up with.
And you ended the text by saying, need to handle this quickly. Why was there a need to handle this quickly?
Dust on my side of the aisle. There was a growing frustration with the process.
And how, if at all, did Dylan Howard respond to your text?
I asked Cam to call you.
Continuing on to the next page and directing your attention to the blown-up line, which is 322. Did you send another text that same day?
Yes.
And can you read us that text, please?
This is from me to Dylan. He wants me to call Cohen. You think that's okay? I've been trying like hell to avoid that.
What did you mean by that? First of all, who wanted you to call him?
Cameron Straker.
And what was your understanding of why Cam wanted you to call Michael Cohen?
No response.
Withdrawn. Between that last text and this text, did you have a conversation on the phone with Cameron?
I did.
Can you tell us about it?
Not only were we not on the same page between the short form and the long form, and then Dylan asked me to call Cameron. And I did call Cameron. And even when we spoke, we still weren't on the same page. I think I told him that. I know I told him that. I said, look, this agreement doesn't nearly comport to what was agreed to in the deal points. I think I was frustrated. He was frustrated, and he said, why don't you just call Cohen?
He, meaning Cam, suggested you call Cohen?
Yes.
Did you ask Mr. Straker why he wanted you to call Michael Cohen if Michael Cohen had nothing to do with the deal?
I believe so. I probably did. I don't have a specific recollection. I thought it was odd, certainly.
Sorry?
I thought it was odd.
And so what did you mean when you said, I've been trying like hell to avoid that?
My first interaction with Michael Cohen was in 2011, regarding that blog post that we discussed earlier. And my interaction with him around that time in 2011 was not pleasant or constructive, and I didn't particularly like dealing with him. And that's why I was trying like hell to avoid talking to him.
Continuing on this text string from the same day, I'm speaking specifically, of page 8, lines 326 through 330. I'll just ask you to, again, read us through these texts, who sent them, and what they mean.
August 5th, from Dylan Howard to me. Okay, we are paying.
Let me stop you right there for a second. What did you understand that to mean?
That they were ready to pay for the deal.
Okay, how did you respond, or how, I guess, is that next text another text from Dylan Howard?
Yes.
What does it say?
Glad it all sorted.
And then did he say anything else?
Fucking Jesus.
You're quoting, so it's okay. Did you have any understanding of what that all meant, those three texts?
I think it was just a frustrating deal for everybody involved, and it was just a lot of sort of heavy lifting.
And then what did you say?
Yes, I believe so. I told Cohen this never would have happened without you.
How did Dylan Howard respond to that?
He's hopeless. Oh well, another one done.
So from this text exchange, does it appear, let me ask this a different way. Did you call Cohen at some point in the middle of this text exchange?
I recall that I did, yes.
And did you discuss the Karen McDougal contract with him at all?
Yes.
And I'll come back to exactly how that conversation went in a minute. I want to take a minute to show you to show you People's Exhibit 62, which is in evidence. I'll just ask if you recognize this.
Yes.
What is it?
This is an email from me to Michael Cohen asking him to call me.
And what is the date of this email?
August 5th, 2016.
And the time?
2:54 p.m., probably Pacific time.
Do you know if you produced this document or if this was produced by the Trump Organization? You want to lock at the Bates stamp at the bottom?
Sure.
On the documents that you produced, do your Bates start with the letters CUP?
It did.
Does that indicate to you this may have been produced by the Trump Organization?
It did.
Does that clarify at all whether the timestamp on this email was Eastern Time or Pacific Time, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. I know I called him after the deal closed with AMI and Karen.
This seems like a good opportunity to just tell us about the conversation you had with Michael Cohen.
I seem to recall that after the deal closed with After the deal closed with AMI, I called Michael Cohen. And I can't recall specifically whether maybe Dylan asked me to or something, but I called him and let him know, as a professional courtesy, that the deal involving his client had closed. And I told him, as it stated to you and Dylan Howard, that this deal wouldn't have happened without Dylan.
Now, you said that you called Michael Cohen as a professional courtesy because the deal involving his client closed. What client is that?
Donald Trump.
Was Donald Trump a party to this agreement, a named party to this agreement between yourself or between, I should say, Karen McDougal and AMI?
No.
Did you recognize the extent to which the deal could benefit Mr. Cohen's client, Donald Trump?
Yes.
What was Michael Cohen's reaction when you told him that the deal was closed?
He was pleased.
Now, that deal between AMI and Karen McDougal, did the contract eventually get signed?
Yes.
And generally speaking, what were the terms?
There was a financial aspect of the deal. I think it was $150,000. It involved certain personal services that Karen would render to AMI, which included, magazine covers, weekly or monthly columns where she could write on subject matters that interested her, and I believe that was it.
As part of that deal, did AMI acquire Karen McDougal's limited life story rights to any romantic, personal, and/or physical relationship with any then-married man?
Yes.
Just to be clear, who negotiated these terms on behalf of AMI?
Mainly Dylan Howard, and then Cameron got involved at some point.
And on behalf of Karen McDougal?
I did.
I'm now showing you what's in evidence already as People's Exhibit 156. Can you show them to everyone? Is this the final deal signed between AMI and Karen McDougal?
Assuming that it's signed.
Well, we can skip to the last page and I'll show you that.
Yes, this is the final deal.
And going back to that first page for a minute, just blowing up the top portion, what is the effective date on this contract?
August 5th, 2016.
I'm going to blow up paragraph 3. I'm just going to ask you to read it to yourself. You don't have to read the whole thing out loud. Read it to yourself, and let us know what you understood this paragraph to mean.
Well, I'm ready.
Okay, can you tell us what it means?
That Karen had, in the process of entering into this contract with AMI, that she granted her limited life rights related to the subject matter, any affairs she had with any then-married man to AMI. So that became, in effect, their intellectual property, their exclusive intellectual property.
Now, based on non-privileged communications to which you were privy, was there a particular then-married man with whom you understood this to apply?
Yes.
Who?
Donald Trump.
I'm going to move to paragraphs 4 and 5 and ask you, first of all, does paragraph 4 contain the amount that AMI was compensating Karen McDougal for her limited life rights, as well as some of the other services that you mentioned?
Yes.
How much was she being paid?
$150,000.
How much of that went to you?
Somewhere between, I think, 45%.
Can you read that paragraph out loud?
Paragraph 5. Nothing herein shall obligate AMI to use the life rights in connection with any media. AMI's obligations to McDougal shall be the payment to McDougal of the sum set forth in paragraph 4 and the obligations set forth in paragraph 1, 2.1, and 2.2.
Those paragraphs, 1, 2.1, 2.2, does that set out the other services that you mentioned?
Yes.
What does this paragraph mean, paragraph 5?
It means that it was really AMI's option as to whether or not they ever wanted to run the story of Karen's interaction with any then-married man or not. It was their option to either run it or not.
Now, at the time this agreement was executed, did you believe AMI intended to publish the story?
No.
Why did you believe that?
I believe it was stated.
Stated by whom, if you remember?
AMI.
Did you have an understanding as to why AMI would be purchasing a story that they didn't intend to print?
I think there were two. I think one explanation that was given was that they were trying to build Karen into a brand and didn't want to diminish her reputation. And the second was more of an unspoken understanding that there was a close affiliation between David Pecker and Donald Trump, and that AMI would not run this story or any story related to Karen and Donald Trump, as it would tend to hurt Donald Trump.
When you say hurt Donald Trump, you mean hurt Donald Trump's campaign?
Yes.
Thank you. Again, I'm not going to ask you to read this whole paragraph out loud. You can just read it to yourself, and when you're done, maybe you can tell us what it means.
This is really an exclusivity paragraph. It means the rights that Karen was transferring to AMI were exclusive, and she could not. She retained no intellectual property rights in the story for herself, and that's one. And two, that she cannot transfer them subsequently to anybody else.
She no longer owned her own story?
The limited story.
The portion of the story that dealt with her affair with Donald Trump?
Fair.
Is that true?
True.
What would happen, according to this paragraph, if Karen McDougal did take her story elsewhere?
The last sentence is a liquidated damages provision. She would owe back basically the $150,000.
Would she owe back the entire $150,000, even though she was doing magazine covers and columns?
Pardon?
Would she owe back the entire $150,000, even though she was still doing the columns and magazine covers?
Yes.
Going back to that signature on page 3, did Karen McDougal sign this document?
Yes.
Can you blow up the bottom, please?
Yes.
And can you blow up a little more of the bottom? I would like to know what date she signed it.
Yeah, this is Johnny Crawford that we mentioned earlier, which is a notary. August 6th, 2016.
And who, if anyone, signed the agreement on behalf of AMI?
It looks to be Chief Content Officer, which would be Dylan Howard.
So Dylan Howard's title is listed. Do you recognize whether or not that's his signature?
Not particularly.
Okay, let's go back to People's 176A in evidence, specifically page 9, lines 357 to 61. I'm going to ask you, this another text exchange between you and Dylan Howard from August 5th, 2016?
Yes.
Let me double check one moment. I think I misspoke. Is this a text exchange between you and Dylan Howard from August 8th of 2016?
Yes, what was the date of that AMI, the 5th?
That last exhibit? I don't want to testify. We can pull that back up. I believe you told us it was signed on August 6th. Let me show you the first page in terms of the effective date.
Fair enough, thank you.
So just for the record, what is the effective date of the contract?
August 5th, 2016.
Okay, going back now to what we were showing you before, some texts on page 9 of 176. Lines 357 to 61. And were these texts back and forth sent on August 8th and at the very bottom, August 9th of 2016?
Yes.
And what do the texts say, please?
This is from me to Dylan. I am going to let ABC know that Karen has decided to keep her story quiet. I'm going to let them know that the family has begged and pleaded with her to not come out, and that she has promised her family she wouldn't. I will have Karen ignore all of their calls. Any objection?
What did you mean by that?
I stated before we had parallel negotiations with AMI and ABC, and I needed to sort of off-board ABC, and I'll leave it at that.
How did Dylan Howard respond?
Yep, that's fine.
And what did you say after that?
Laughs. By the way, they promised her a role on Dancing with the Stars. Season 578568655.
Was the number of the season another joke?
Yes.
Does BTW stand for by the way? No, that is a silly question.
Yes.
Had a potential role on Dancing with the Stars been part of the package that you were negotiating with ABC on behalf of Ms. McDougal?
It was discussed a lot. And there was an inference that best efforts would be made to make that happen, but it was never guaranteed, and it was never part of the deal. But best efforts were discussed.
Okay, and how did Dylan respond?
Huh. Laugh.
Did he send you another text?
Yes, payment will be made this week. FYI, sooner rather than later. Is it going to you?
Okay, thank you very much. You can take that down. Mr. Davidson, do you know someone named Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
I'm what context?
Stormy Daniels was a client of mine.
And are you aware of her going by any other names?
Stephanie Clifford.
How did it come to be that you represented Stormy Daniels?
Stormy Daniels was a talent, and she was managed by Gina Rodriguez, who we discussed earlier. And so Gina referred Stormy to me.
Got it. And what was your understanding of the relationship at the time between Stormy Daniels and Gina Rodriguez at the time?
Gina was a talent manager and Stormy was talent.
I guess my question is, was Gina Stormy's manager?
Yes.
When you said earlier you told us about a 2011 encounter Gina had with Michael Cohen and also involved Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
In 2011, did you ever speak to Stormy Daniels, or did you deal exclusively with Gina Rodriguez or someone else?
I think I had a brief conversation with Stormy and Gina.
In 20117?
Yeah, but most of my conversations, I believe, were with Gina.
What, if anything, did you do on behalf of Stormy Daniels in 2011?
Sent a cease and desist letter to the blog that we mentioned earlier, thedirty.com.
So the name of the blog is thedirty.com?
Yes.
What was the nature of the story that was on the blog that caused you to send the cease and desist letter?
There was a blog post or a story posted on the website that stated that Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump had some sort of a physical or romantic, interaction.
So you said that in connection with this effort on your part, that you had a conversation with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Can you tell us how that came about and how that conversation went?
Yes, Michael Cohen, the blog post had published. And apparently, or I was informed that Gina had received a phone call from Michael Cohen. And the phone call that she received from Michael Cohen, I think it was a voicemail. I know it was a voicemail. And it might have either been a voicemail or a phone call that was answered by Gina's ex-husband. In any event, Gina called me up to tell me that some jerk called me and was very, very aggressive and threatened to sue me. And I, would like you, Keith, to call this jerk back.
I hate to ask it this way, but who was that jerk?
It was Michael Cohen.
So what happened when you called? Did you call Michael Cohen?
I did.
Tell us about that.
Gina provided me the number that he left, either with her ex or on the voicemail. It was for the Trump Organization. I called. I was transferred to Michael Cohen. I introduced myself. And before I could barely get my name out, IWAs just met with like a hustle barrage of insults and insinuations and allegations. That went on for quite a while.
What was the gist of what he was accusing you of?
I don't think he was accusing us of anything. He was just screaming.
Okay, what was he upset about?
He was upset that the story on thedirty.com got published, and he believed that Stormy Daniels was the source behind the story.
So what did you tell him?
Well, finally, After he finished, I explained to him that I was calling because my client, Stormy Daniels, did not want the story published, and I wanted to see if he had done anything to contact the Dirty to get that story taken down as of that time. He told me that he had not yet done anything, and then when I told him that my client wanted it taken down, he was like, "Well, why don't you go have them do it and let me know how you make out?"
How withdrawn? You said you sent a cease and desist letter, right?
Yes.
What happened as a result of you sending that cease and desist letter?
I was successful in accomplishing my client's goals, in having its story taken down.
That was in 2011.
Yes.
Now, in the summer and fall of 2016, did you resume representation of Stormy Daniels in the matter of her liaison with Mr. Trump?
In the summer of 2016?
Yes, the summer, actually. I think the question was summer and fall. You can clarify.
I don't believe so. I don't think it was until the fall.
Okay, so let me show you what's in evidence as People's 176.
This is that same set of text messages. I want to go back to page 4, specifically lines 175 to 177.
Again, I'll ask you, is this another text exchange between you and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
What is the date of this exchange?
June 30th, 2016.
What do the texts say?
This is from Dylan to me. FYI, Gina trying to hawk Stormy again.
What did you understand that to mean?
Part of Gina's role and responsibility or services that she provided was to monetize stories in the press. She was like a storyboker, and Dylan obviously was a purchaser of stories. So I interpreted from this text that Dylan had been approached by Gina, who was trying to sell the story regarding Stormy and Donald Trump again.
And did you respond in some way?
I responded, "LOL, she's trying to sell a story to you, ?
LOL? Is that texting lingo for laugh out loud?
It is.
How did Pylon respond?
Yep.
How did you interpret that whole exchange? What did you interpret that to mean?
As I previously stated, that Gina was bringing TL story back to market.
And that she had contacted Dylan Howard about it?
Yes.
Now, did there come a point in time in which interest in the Stormy Daniels story increased?
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, in 2011, we know that the Dirty published their story. And I think I later learned that there was some other interest in 2011 from In Touch magazine. Years went by. At least 5 years went by until that last text message with Dylan. And really there was very little, to Gina's dissatisfaction, very little interest in the story publishing or in the marketability of the story. This continued through the summer from what I understand. I was not involved. But through the summer into the fall where there was still being very little interest, despite the fact that Mr. Trump's notoriety was gaining.
Directing your attention to October 7th, of 2016, did you come to learn about the release of something that's known as the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
And briefly for the jury, what is the Access Hollywood tape?
The Access Hollywood tape, from what I understand, was what's called a hot mic, which is a microphone that's recording. And I think the insinuation when you say hot mic is it's live and recording, but perhaps unknown to the person who is micced. So, this was an incident where Donald Trump and Billy Bush was in the van. They were on the set of Access Hollywood, or it was released by Access Hollywood. I don't even know. There was an allegation that, at least a record, the hot mic recorded some statements by both men that were troublesome.
What impact, if any, did the release of the Access Hollywood tape have on interest in Stormy Daniels' story, so far as you were aware?
So far as I'm aware, it had tremendous influence.
Can you explain that a little bit to the jury, please?
Yes. Before Access Hollywood tape, there was very little, if any, interest from what I understand. And Gina was trying to sell the Stormy Daniels Donald Trump story. It wasn't until Access Hollywood that interest sort of reached a crescendo.
So going back to People's 176A in evidence, specifically on page 1761, lines 482 to 494, is this another text exchange between you and Dylan Howard on October 8th and October 9th of 20167?
Yes.
Who sent the first text in this chain?
It's from me.
And what did you say?
Trump is FD.
You wrote the whole word out, F'd, in the text?
I did.
What prompted you to say that Trump was F'd?
The Access Hollywood tape.
How did Dylan Howard respond?
He responded with a, "Wave the white flag, it's over, people," exclamation point.
And how did you interpret that?
I think he was seconding my opinion.
Based on the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
What did you say after that?
Well, this is the next day. It looks like from Keith to Dylan. Hi, the story is already out there.
And did you send that along with a link to the Dirty.com?
Yes.
Is that the same article in Dirty.com which you had successfully removed 5 years earlier?
Yes, they republished the same article.
After the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
What did Dylan say at that point?
His response on October 9th was, yeah, but her talking and taping blank is the final nail in the coffin, ... But he's fucked already.
What did you mean by that?
That was Dylan who was the author of that.
I'm sorry, what did you understand that to mean?
That the dirty post was bad, but it could get a lot.
How could it get a lot worse?
If she made comment.
In other words, the dirty.com story was kind of a third-party account. That would be different from one of the participants in a sexual encounter publicly revealing the details of that?
Precisely.
Then how did you respond to that?
He really is.
Now, around that time, did you become involved in negotiating a deal on behalf of Stormy Daniels?
No.
Okay, did you work on a deal involving Stormy Daniels?
Ultimately, I did.
Well, how did that come about?
No response.
You should explain whatever hesitation you have here.
Gina, after the Access Hollywood tape, she went directly to Dylan and negotiated a deal with Dylan outside of me. I had nothing to do with that deal, and I believe they came to terms.
I'm sorry?
I believe they came to terms.
Did there come a time when you spoke with Dylan Howard about the Stormy Daniels story?
Yes.
And how did that conversation go?
I don't recall, other than what has already been displayed.
So, okay, let me show you People's 178A in evidence. So everyone can see it. I'm going to ask you, do you recognize this?
Yes.
And is this a record of texts among yourself, Michael Cohen, and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Did you answer that?
Yes, it is a record of text between the three of us.
Can we just unblow it up for a second? How many texts are in this chain? Ooh-fi-oo, copyright 2. Now we can blow it back up. Thank you. What is the date of these two texts? October 10th of 2016.
Yes.
And what is said during this text exchange?
This is authored by Dylan. Keith/Michael. Connecting you both in regards to that business opportunity. Spoke to with the client this AM, and they're confirmed to proceed with the opportunity. Thanks, Dylan.
What did you understand that to mean?
Well, prior to this text, like I said, Gina and Dylan to terms on an agreement that AMI had agreed to this story for $120,000. Dylan and AMI backed out of that deal. It sort of fell apart. And Dylan asked Gina to call Michael Cohen and finish the deal with him, and Gina refused. So she asked me to call Cohen, and I refused. And then Dylan called me to convince me to call Cohen.
So can we just break that down?
Sure.
Though you didn't use pronouns, so that was helpful.
The moral of the story was, no one wanted to talk to Cohen.
Okay.
Whereupon the people and some jurors laugh.
Can you walk us through that a little more slowly? That Cohen got involved in this deal, notwithstanding the fact that Gina Rodriguez and Dylan Howard had already negotiated the deal?
So the Access Hollywood tape dropped. Gina and Dylan came to terms at $120,000. Dylan backed out, which left that deal up in the air. AMI did not want to complete the deal, or would not complete the deal. And Dylan asked Gina to call Cohen and close the deal with him. Gina refused, and asked me to call Cohen on behalf of Stormy, and close the deal that had already been agreed to.
So Dylan sends this text, and then Dylan sends another text?
Yes.
What was the other text?
Over to the two of you.
Actually, it says over to you two?
Over to you two.
Who did you understand you two to mean?
Michael Cohen and I.
Going back to that first text for a moment, what did you understand Dylan to be saying when he said, spoke to the client this AM and they're confirmed to proceed with the opportunity?
That he spoke to either Gina or Gina and Stormy, and that they were confirmed to proceed. He, Dylan, was washing his hands of the deal and sort of handing the deal over to, first, Gina to close. And then she didn't want to do that. And ultimately, me to close with Cohen.
What was your understanding of Michael Cohen's interest in the matter?
I believe that Michael Cohen was personal attorney or general counsel for Donald Trump, and that this story involved his client, and that was his interest in the story.
Was it unusual withdrawn? You said you had known Dylan Howard for years?
Yes.
And you had other business interactions with Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Was it unusual for Dylan Howard to connect you to someone outside of AMI to purchase a story?
I think this is the only time that ever happened.
So did there come a time after this that you spoke with Michael Cohen about the Stormy Daniels story?
Yes.
And do you remember withdrawn? Tell us how that conversation went.
Well, it was different than 2011. And it was fairly conciliatory. The deal had already been cut at $120,000. And then, we needed to pad the deal, to compensate me now because I was added to the deal. And Stormy and Gina weren't going to take a discount for involving me. So that 120 became 130.
So when you say the deal is already cut at $120,000, it was cut between Stormy Daniels and AMI, right?
Yes.
Was this the same deal in your mind or a different deal? How?
It was the same deal. They were going to acquire the intellectual property rights in this story, exclusive rights.
But instead of AMI purchasing it, it was now Michael Cohen on behalf of Donald Trump?
Well, after AMI washed their hands of the deal and then they handed it. AMI handed it off to Cohen. They, in essence, Michael Cohen, stepped into AMI's shoes.
And at the time that you got involved, had Michael Cohen already stepped into AMI's shoes?
I believe so.
Did you negotiate withdrawn? You said you had to pad the deal so that you could get compensated, is that right?
Yes.
How did you pad the deal so you could get compensated?
Gina approached me. She said, "Hey, can we have this deal?" She said, "It's going to be the easiest deal you've ever done in your entire life." Laughs. "It's already been negotiated. It's already done. All you need to do is paper it and talk to that asshole Cohen."
That's what Gina said?
Yes.
And did you know when you were dealing with Michael Cohen that you were dealing with Donald Trump?
Yes, I never thought otherwise.
And how did you change the terms of the deal that had previously been negotiated between Gina and Dylan Howard so that you would be compensated now that the deal was between Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen?
I think a little of that happened even before my involvement, and there was when Dylan washed his hands of it, he and Gina had a conversation, and Gina said, "Well, look, we already have a deal of 120. If I need to bring a lawyer into this, our net is going to be reduced." And Dylan said, "Don't worry about it. We'll make the deal, or Cohen will make the deal, 150,000. And then Gina called me, engaged me. I called Cohen and picked it up.
And what was the price that you agreed on with Michael Cohen?
So the 150 wasn't really true. It turned out to be 130. So it was the original 120 plus 10,000.
I am now showing you People's Exhibit 63 in evidence. I'm going to display page 1. This is in evidence. Everyone can see it. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
This is an email from me to Michael Cohen.
And what is the date of this email from you to Michael Cohen?
October 11th, 2016.
Did the email contain attachments?
Yes.
Are those attachments listed where it says attachments?
Yes.
What were the attachments to the email?
Side letter agreement, confidential settlement agreement, and my firm's wiring instructions, bank wiring instructions.
Who were the parties to the settlement agreement?
Was Stormy Daniels on one side, and you see the subject line SD?
Yes.
Stormy Daniels versus RCI.
What is RCI?
RCI was an LLC that Michael told me he was going to use to pay for this deal.
Do you know what that, off the top of your head, do you remember what that stands for?
Resolution Consultants Incorporated, I believe.
Now, did the settlement use pseudonyms?
Yes.
What was Stormy Daniels' pseudonym?
Peggy Peterson.
What was Donald Trump's pseudonym?
I think it was David Dennison.
Who came up with those pseudonyms?
I did.
How?
I used PP because she was the plaintiff, and DD because he was the defendant.
Is David Dennison a real person?
He was on my high school hockey team.
Whereupon people laugh.
How does he feel about you now?
He's very upset.
Whereupon people laugh.
Now, one of the attachments that you mentioned was called a side letter agreement, I believe you said.
Yes.
What's a side letter agreement?
The side letter agreement is an addendum to an underlying contract, and, it has terms to the original contract.
And what was the purpose of using a side letter agreement with this particular deal?
The side letter agreement. The purpose for using a side letter agreement. It uses like code words that are used in a military-like operation, so it ensures the further confidentiality in case a fully executed contract was lost or stolen. So even if that occurred, you wouldn't lose the confidential nature of the document. So the side letter agreement is typically used in these cases to identify the identity of the true parties involved, and it's really for attorney's eyes only.
Okay, so just to be clear, who were the two parties to this agreement whose names, whose identities were being protected?
Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump.
One of the attachments also to this email withdrawn. What did you say in the body of the email in which you transmitted these documents? Let's start with paragraph 1.
Paragraph 1.
Yes.
Would you like me to read it?
Please.
Please fund Ms. Daniels' settlement agreement and side letter agreement attached. I have notified in the side letter agreement SLA which identities the parties to this agreement. Under the terms of the agreement, neither my client nor I are entitled to possession of the side letter agreement. That's paragraph 1.
I am sorry.
That's paragraph 1.
So why were you as the lawyer not entitled to keep a copy?
Michael Cohen demanded that only he retain a copy of the side letter agreement.
Is that unusual?
Yes.
Paragraph 2, please.
The settlement sum is $130,000. I have also attached my firm's wiring instructions for your reference.
Is that the clause that contains the payment being made to Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
And does that sum of $130,000 include your fee and Gina Rodriguez's fee?
Yes, the gross. That's the gross, yes.
Okay, thank you. Paragraph 3.
Ms. Daniels expressed dissatisfaction with your schedule of a delay of 10 days for funding. To that end, you'll see that I placed this Friday, October 14th, 16 as the funding deadline. Let me know if there is a problem.
What is a funding deadline?
Well, the contract called for payment, a settlement sum, and the funding deadline to which it must be funded.
Did you actually receive payment from anyone on the Trump side on October 14th, 2016?
We did not.
Do you know why not?
No.
I'm showing you People's Exhibit 64 in evidence. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Is this an email withdrawn? What is this?
This is an email from me to Michael Cohen.
On what day?
October 12th, 2016.
What does it say on the subject line?
Daniels.
And just zooming back out for a minute, if we were to read this exhibit chronologically, would we start at the bottom?
Yes.
Let's start at the bottom. Can you describe what is said in this exchange?
We good.
Who said that?
I did.
And how did Michael Cohen respond?
Yes, it's Yom Kippur, so the office is closed for all purposes. I will start over. Yes, it's Yom Kippur, so the office is for all purposes closed. I am in tomorrow, but I can speak for the next 3 hours via cell if necessary.
How, if at all, did you respond to that?
Because it was a holiday, I didn't feel the need to speak that day. I said, it was not necessary to speak today. You should have all the executed documents a few days ago. Talk to you tomorrow.
When you wrote the executed documents, was that a reference to the signed attachments that you sent the day before that were part of People's 63 that we just saw?
Yes.
Showing you People's 65 in evidence. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is this?
This is an email from me to Michael Cohen on October 14th, 2016.
And, among other things, are you re-forwarding the email from October 11th, which included all those attachments we just described?
Yes.
Did it include the wiring instructions for a second time?
Yes.
Why did you resend the documents?
Well, after the Yom Kippur email, which I at some point began to think is an excuse for failure to fund, there were other excuses. And the other excuses included, for example, Yom Kippur, and included the fact that he didn't have my wiring instructions. So I re-forwarded him the wiring instructions.
Okay, I am now showing you People's Exhibit 281 in evidence. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is this?
This is an email from me to Michael Cohen, dated October 17th, 2016.
And what is the subject line?
PP versus DD, important.
And what does PP and DD refer to?
The pseudonyms that we used in the settlement agreement.
Peggy Peterson and David Dennison?
Yes.
You told us, I think, the date of the email was what?
October 17th, 2016.
And what was the domain of the email address that you used for Michael Cohen when you sent this email?
Trumporg.com.
Can you please read the email?
Michael, I have been charged by my client with forwarding the below message. We have a written settlement agreement which calls for settlement payment to be made by the end of business this past Friday, October 14th, 2016. No payment was received. Next paragraph. We spoke on Friday, October 14th. You stated that the funds would be wired today, October 17th, 2016. No funds have been received as of the sending of this email. Next paragraph. My client informs me that she intends to cancel the settlement contract if no funds are received by 5 p.m. Pacific Time today. Please call me if you have any questions. Keith.
What prompted you to send this email?
Their failure to meet the funding deadline repeatedly, and being met with a barrage of excuses as to why they had failed.
In addition to these emails back and forth between yourself and Michael Cohen, were you also speaking with him on the phone during this period?
Yes.
Can you tell us in general every conversation? Can you tell us in general what those conversations were like?
They were rather conciliatory, but it was sort of circular arguments. It was excuses. It was contradictions. Things that he was saying didn't make sense from one conversation to the next. Again, the contradictions just didn't leave me with a comfort level that there was a true intention to fund the deal.
Do you remember any of the other excuses that he gave you?
Yes.
Tell us some.
He stated that the computer systems were all fucked up. He stated, "You can't believe what we're going through. The Secret Service is in here. They have so many goddamn firewalls. I can't get shit. It's not my fault. You're going to have to resend the agreements again. I never got your emails." Even though he previously told me he received them and the wiring instructions. I think that's it for this period of time that I can recall.
Did he ever make reference to Mr. Trump's whereabouts?
Yes.
What do you remember him saying about that?
I called him and said, "Michael, this is a very bad situation. I have a client and her rep Gina who is very upset. It's making me look bad." and I don't believe really a word that you are saying." And then he said, "Well, God damn it, what do you expect me to do? My guy is in 5 fucking states today, or 3 or 4 or 5 different states today. There is nothing I can do. I'm doing everything I can."
When he said that his guy was in a certain number of states, who did you understand his guy to be making reference to?
Donald Trump.
And what was the relevance, based on your conversation with Michael Cohen, about what was the relevance of the fact that Mr. Trump was in 3 or 4 or 5 different states?
What did that mean to me?
What did it mean to you?
To me it was similar. It's a situation I run into all the time. It was similar to like someone who doesn't have the purse strings. It's like an attorney has to go call an insurance adjuster. Like that. Michael Cohen didn't have the authority to actually spend money, despite the fact there has been so many excuses and funding deadlines that have already been missed.
You believe that Michael Cohen didn't have the authority to spend the money?
Yes.
Did he at some point say something to you about what he would do to get the money?
Yes.
What did he say?
Well, I think you can tell by these emails that I was sending him there was a great level of frustration by me and my clients and her rep. I let him know that the level of dissatisfaction was quite high, and he stated, "God damn it, I'll just do it myself."
What did you understand him to mean when he said, "I'll just do it myself"?
That he would not seek authority to consummate the deal, fund the deal. It was consummated with a "excuse me" signature. He would waive the authority in order to fund.
Did you ever believe that Michael Cohen was going to be the ultimate source of the funds?
Never prior to funding, no.
Even after he said, "I'll just do it myself," where did you understand the money would be coming from?
Objection.
Overruled.
From Donald Trump or some corporate affiliation thereof.
Okay, so I'm going to show you People's 282 in evidence. Is this another email from you to Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And what is the date and subject line?
October 17th, 2016.
And the subject?
PP versus DD important.
And the body of the email?
Please be advised that my client deems her settlement agreement canceled and void ab initio.
And who did you mean by my client?
Stormy Daniels.
And what does ab initio mean?
It's a Latin term used in the law for void, I believe. Void from the beginning of time, as if it never occurred at all.
Why did you tell Michael Cohen that you no longer represented Stormy Daniels in this deal or any other matter?
It was twofold. 1, because I divested myself of the case. And 2, because I didn't want to receive a million frustrating phone calls from Michael. He created this drama and this situation.
Did you communicate with Stormy Daniels and or Gina Rodriguez around this time?
Yes.
Which one?
Both.
And what was the nature of that conversation?
I let them know that, even leading up to this, I let them know that, they wanted frequent updates. I would like to start over.
Go ahead.
They wanted frequent updates, and they received frequent updates. The only updates I could give them were the repeated excuses that I was hearing. That was a great source of frustration. And then when push came to shove, this email that's displayed is the straw that broke the camel's back. This is where push came to shove. This is when I said, "Hey, this deal is over." And I said to both Cohen and to my client, "I'm out. Go in peace."
During either that conversation or another conversation with Stormy Daniels and or Gina Rodriguez, did they express to you any views about what was happening here?
I'm not going to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
Fair enough. Let me ask you do you believe that you represented Gina in this matter as well?
I don't mean to parse words, but I viewed Gina's role in this situation as that of a manager, which would make her a legal agent to my client Stormy Daniels. So if I was talking to Gina, it was if I was talking to my client, and the privilege would exist.
All right. Did there come a time when you resumed your involvement, notwithstanding this email in the deal between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump?
Yes.
How did that come about?
I don't have a specific recollection.
Do you remember talking with Dylan Howard at any point during this period of where you believed you were getting excuses from Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that conversation or conversations that you had with Dylan Howard?
I recall having conversations with Dylan where I would express that I believed Cohen was not being truthful.
When you say you believed, you expressed to Dylan that Cohen was not being truthful about what?
About his excuses for failure to fund.
What did you think was really happening?
What did I think was really happening?
Yes, in terms of Michael Cohen's failure to fund, what did you believe was really happening?
I thought he was trying to kick the can down the road until after the election.
Are we taking an afternoon break? If so, this would be a good time.
All right, I will see you at 10 to 4.
Jury leaving courtroom. Witness leaving courtroom.
An hour and a half.
I will see you at 10 to 4.
Continued case on trial. People versus Donald J. Trump. Witness entering courtroom.
Let's get the jury.
Jury entering courtroom.
Continuing case on trial, People versus Donald J. Trump. All parties and all jurors are present.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Davidson.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to show you People's 176A again, specifically page 10, lines 500 to 503. Is this the text exchange between yourself and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
And what is the date of these texts?
October 17th, 2016.
Through?
October 18th, 2016.
Okay, so who is the first text in this particular exchange from?
This is from Dylan to me.
What does it say?
Cohen texting me if I have reached Gina. I said, "She's not taking my calls again. I want distance." He writes back, "You're kidding me. One way they can settle this impending storm."
What did you understand this to mean?
That Cohen was leaning on Dylan to placate Gina.
And withdrawn. Okay, did you respond?
Yes.
How did you respond?
Can't believe Cohen let this go. It's going to be a shit show.
What did you mean by that?
Once I divested myself from the case and Gina and Stormy were, I think they were going to publicize the matter.
When you say publicize the matter, you mean through a different media outlet?
Or many.
Or many different media outlets. So specifically, what did you mean when you said it's going to be a shit show?
I just felt like it was going to be more than a flurry of activity. I felt it would be a tornado.
When the story got out, if the story got out?
Yes.
What did Dylan Howard say in response, if anything?
Did they do the deal?
And what did you understand that to mean?
I think that Gina and Stormy had another deal, a backup deal in the wings, and he was asking if they closed that secondary deal.
He being Dylan Howard?
Yes.
How did you respond?
That's what I hear. I think it will be a full-on blight.
What did you mean by that?
That there would be tremendous media activity around the subject of the story.
Now, again, without getting into the substance of privileged conversations, would you say you were talking during this period more with Gina Rodriguez or more with Stormy Daniels or about the same?
I think overall I was talking to Gina, overall 85% of the time. When things got really heated, Stormy participated more. But I think around this time it was probably just Gina.
Okay, moving on to page 11, entries 504 to 506. I think continuing this exchange, how did Dylan respond?
I bet.
And withdrawn. Did he then send a follow-up?
He did.
And what did he say?
I am quoting Dylan, he said, "All because Trump is tight."
What did you understand that to mean?
That Mr. Trump was frugal.
What relevance did this have to the conversation that you were having with Dylan, Mr. Trump's frugality?
That they had this deal on a silver platter. It was there for the taking. It didn't close. The only way it doesn't close is because it didn't fund. The only reason it didn't fund is because they didn't want to spend the money.
During your dealings with Michael Cohen, did he tell you who he was representing in these negotiations?
I don't think every single time I talked to Michael Cohen, he leaned on his close affiliation with Donald Trump. I don't know if it was ever explicitly said, "I am negotiating this matter on behalf of Donald Trump." It was part of his identity, and he let me know at every opportunity he could that he was working for Donald Trump.
And when you were negotiating the settlement agreement with Michael Cohen, did you have an understanding of who was ultimately going to be responsible for paying Ms. Daniels?
No.
Let me show you privately grand jury page 525. I believe that's People's Exhibit 508. I'm going to ask you, just yourself and the parties and the judge.
I object to this.
Approach.
Whereupon proceedings were held at sidebar.
The last question was, do you have an understanding of who was going to be ultimately responsible? I am summarizing. The answer is no. The witness didn't indicate there was any lack of recollection. Now we're basically the people's witness impeaching their testimony. Either way, it should not be put in front of him right now. The answer is the answer. It should stand.
Yes.
I am deliberately not violating Penal Law 60.35 by not asking him the substance of the previous communication. I am showing it to him to refresh his recollection without disclosing the content.
He hasn't stated he needs his recollection refreshed. You haven't asked him, so your objection is sustained.
He's been precise about refreshing his recollection. He did not have such an understanding. It would be improper to go back and say,
Let's see if it does.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Your objection is sustained. Can you please read back the last question?
Mr. Davidson, have you previously testified about this point in the grand jury in this case?
Objection.
Yes.
Would reviewing that testimony help refresh your recollection about your answer to that question?
Objection.
Overruled. Please approach.
Whereupon proceedings were held at sidebar.
This is what I was concerned about at the end of the last sidebar. The witness has not indicated that he has a lack of recollection. To ask a leading question to try to drive him to say, yes, I do have an absence of recollection, so it could be refreshed. That is improper. The answer should stand.
The whole point, how should I find out if he needs his recollection refreshed or ask him?
He hasn't said he could have his recollection refreshed. He gave an answer. That's his answer.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but, the fact that there was a very long pause between the answer that he gave and the question that I asked, that is part of why I am seeing if something could refresh his recollection. I could acknowledge that he gave the answer.
You could go back and ask.
I can do that.
Just in fairness, Mr. Bove, you might have a few times yourself.
In the context where I get to lead the witness?
That's true.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Okay, the objection is sustained.
Mr. Davidson, I noticed when I asked you that last question about what your understanding was about who was going to be ultimately responsible, you paused before you gave your answer. Is that true?
Yes.
Is that pause any indication that you might want to have your recollection refreshed?
Objection.
Sustained to form.
As you sit here.
Can I have the question read back?
Which question? It was sustained. I don't think it can be read back. Let me ask a different question. Is there a question that I asked that you are unclear about what I was asking?
I believe so.
So a few questions ago, I asked the question, when you were negotiating the settlement agreement with Michael Cohen, did you have an understanding of who was ultimately going to be responsible for paying Ms. Daniels? Is that the question that you wanted to be read back?
Yes.
That one, you could answer that. There is no objection. How would you answer that?
I find that question confusing.
Sorry, let me see if I could clarify. Who were you negotiating with? Withdrawn. Is your problem my use of the word negotiating? Is that a big problem?
No.
When you were dealing with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Did you have an understanding of how this deal was going to be funded?
Objection.
Overruled.
I had an assumption.
Objection. Move to strike.
Sustained.
Did Michael Cohen say anything to you during the negotiations that led you to believe that there was someone other than Michael Cohen who was funding this transaction?
Objection.
Sustained.
What causes your uncertainty on this?
Objection.
Sustained.
A few moments ago, we saw a text in which you and Dylan Howard were discussing the fact that you perceived Mr. Trump as being frugal.
Yes.
Do you remember giving that answer?
Yes.
What about Mr. Trump's frugality is relevant to this exchange that you were having with Mr. Dylan Howard?
It was my understanding that Mr. Trump was the beneficiary of this contract, and that in the overwhelming majority of cases, the beneficiary of the contract is the one who funds it.
Objection. Move to strike the last part.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
So what did you attribute the lack of funding of the deal at this point?
Frugality.
Whose frugality?
Objection. May I be heard at sidebar?
Yes, please approach.
Whereupon proceedings were held at sidebar.
Thank you for hearing me, Judge. My objection is that we've now endeavored to attack this several different ways. Both of them has been inadmissible. We're now in a place where this is asked and answered several times over, and I think that the government should be required to move on from here.
It actually hasn't been answered. It has been asked. It has been sustained every which way. I believe the last way is a way that might not be objectionable.
I agree with Mr. Bove. It's time to move on.
Okay.
Whereupon the following proceedings were held in open court.
Going back to page 11, I'm going to blow up some text in the interim between 507 and 512. This is again People's 176 in evidence. Did these texts actually, can we get the few texts that happened right before it as well, please? So at the top of the page, second down, we see the line you have already told us, because Trump is tight. Is that right from Dylan?
Talking with Dylan, yes.
You said, yep, is that right?
Yes.
What does Dylan say?
I reckon that Trump impersonator I hired has more cash.
What did you interpret that to mean?
Yeah.
What did you interpret that to mean?
That Trump wasn't as wealthy as he stated.
And what is the relevance of that observation?
I think that was a follow-up to Dylan's text where he says Trump is tight.
So moving on, do you see a few lines down? I'm going to ask you, please, blow up lines 513 to 519. And what do we see here? What date is this? Who is to talking?
I can't read the exhibit.
We will blow it back up for you in a second.
From the top.
Yes.
This is October 25th, 2016 from Dylan Howard. Going see Pecker in 15. We'll ask for an update. Any word?
And did you respond to that?
Yes.
And what did you say?
I'm awaiting a call any second.
Who are you awaiting a call from, if you remember?
I don't remember.
What did you understand Dylan Howard to mean when he, going to see Pecker in 15, will ask for an update?
I think Dylan or AMI was attempting to resurrect the Stormy Daniels deal.
Okay. How did Dylan Howard respond?
The third text down?
Yes.
Okay.
Did he send another text?
Yes.
And what is the next text? Is this still on October 25th?
Yes.
What did he say?
It's like he is telling me what he wrote to someone else.
Maybe if you could read the text first, then I will ask you how you interpret it.
I wrote, "Keep calling you urgently, period. We have to coordinate something on the matter he is calling you about, or it could look awful for everyone."
You started to tell us what you understood this to mean?
Yes, I think that he is forwarding me a text that he wrote to Michael Cohen.
Were you, in fact, trying to reach Michael Cohen yourself at this point?
I don't believe so.
I'm going to privately show you what's been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 337.
Same objection with the grand jury testimony?
No speaking objections.
This is just for the witness, the parties, and the court. Do you recognize this document?
Objection, Judge.
Sustained. The objection is sustained.
So going back to People's 176.
After that last text, does Dylan Howard send another text? Yes.
What is that text?
Push for the cash. DP and I told him he has to pay the $150.
What did you understand that to mean?
That in the context of what is on the screen, there was an attempt to resurrect this deal that had once fallen apart. That AMI had divested itself from the deal, but they were encouraging Cohen to deal directly with me, and that I should try to get as much as I could, up to $150,000.
And who did you understand DP to be a reference to?
David Pecker.
So when you say resurrect the deal between whom?
Well, the Stormy Daniels deal, but the party on the other side of the deal, not Stormy, had changed. It changed from AMI to Cohen, or his corporate entity.
So when you said resurrect the deal, are you speaking that you interpreted this as resurrecting AMI's deal with Stormy Daniels, or resurrecting Michael Cohen and his entity's deal with Stormy Daniels?
Objection.
Sustained. Which deal are you talking about resurrecting? Which deal are you interpreting this as a deal to resurrect?
The Stormy Daniels deal.
But who is on the other side?
That is what had changed.
It had changed from what to what?
From AMI to Cohen.
Okay, and keep going, please. What is the next?
The next text is from me to Dylan. He says, "You said you're paying."
So he says, you said you're paying?
Yes.
Though is meant by he?
Michael Cohen.
So does this mean at some point during this text exchange you had a conversation with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that conversation, whatever you remember?
Yes, it was very frustrating. The entire matter was very frustrating, that it was on again and off again, that there were delays in funding, cancellations, disengaging from the client, re-engaging with the client, Stormy and Gina. Then Dylan, sort of as a peacemaker, sort of brought me back into the fold. He said he reached out to Pecker and that everything was teed up. And then Dylan tells me, push for the cash, and then basically tells me to call Cohen. Then when I call Cohen, he says, "I'm not paying anything, AMI is paying. It was just one more snafu."
How did you respond to Dylan Howard?
"I am sorry."
You said you sent that text. He says you're paying?
"Yes."
Did you then send another text?
"Yes. Call whenever."
Okay, I'm now showing you People's 283 in evidence. Maybe load that top portion up. I'm going to ask you, what is this document?
This is now the 4th or 5th time I sent my wiring instructions to Michael Cohen.
And in this email, to which domain email address did you use for Michael Cohen?
gmail.com.
And what was the subject line?
Wiring instructions.
And the date of this email?
October 26, 2016. This is now October 26, 2016.
Thank you. What does the body of the email say?
There is no body of the email.
Is there an attachment?
Yes.
What is the attachment?
My wiring instructions.
Can we see page 2 in this exhibit? Is this page 2? Is this the wiring instructions to wire money to your attorney-client trust account?
Yes.
What made you rescind these instructions?
Cohen's repeated assertion that he didn't have my wiring instructions, despite the fact they were repeatedly sent to him previously.
I'm now showing you People's 284 in evidence. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is this?
Michael Cohen had called me and said, "Hey, everything is A-OK. We got everything we need. You know we're sending you the money." So I told him that I didn't believe him, and he forwarded this email to me.
And where was the email from that he was forwarding to you?
First Republic Bank.
What was the subject line that he was forwarding to you?
First Republic Bank transfer.
From which email address did he send this to you?
Trumporg.com.
Does it look like he also forwarded it to his own Gmail account?
Yes.
Now, can we look at the bottom? Does this appear to be a forwarded email?
Yes.
Who is the original email? From whom to whom?
This is from, it looks like, Liz Rappaport, assistant to Gary Farrow, to Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen.
What is the date of that? The date and time of that email being sent from Ms. Rappaport to Mr. Cohen?
I think this was 16 days after the original agreement was entered into. October 16th, 2016.
What does the body say?
Good afternoon, Mr. Cohen. The funds have been deposited into your checking account. Entered in 1897. Best, Lizzie.
What did you take it to mean that Michael Cohen forwarded you to this email?
It meant nothing to me.
Why not?
Because he had my wiring instructions, all he needed to do was wire funds. But he didn't wire funds. He forwarded me an email saying that he had the money, not that he sent the money to me.
How would you describe Michael Cohen, withdrawn? During this time, were you also speaking with Michael Cohen on the phone?
Yes.
How would you describe his demeanor during this time?
He was highly excitable, sort of a pants-on-fire kind of guy. He had a lot of things going on. Frequently, I would be on the phone with him. He would take another call. He would be talking out of two ears. Sort of like that movie with the dogs and squirrels.
Mr. Steinglass, is this a good time to break?
We can break here.
All right. I think we can get the witness back on the stand, please.
Witness entering, whereupon the witness entered the courtroom and was properly seated.
Good morning, sir. Welcome back. I remind you that you are still under oath.
All rise. Jury entering, whereupon the jury entered the courtroom and was properly seated.
Please be seated.
All parties, all jurors are present and properly seated.
Yes.
Good morning, jurors. Welcome back, Mr. Steinglass.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Davidson.
Good morning.
Since you got off the stand on Tuesday afternoon, have you and I discussed anything about the substance of your testimony?
No.
When we broke on Tuesday afternoon, you were talking about some of the email exchanges back and forth between you and Michael Cohen towards the end of October 2016. Do you remember?
Yes.
I am now showing you People's Exhibit 168. It's in evidence and being displayed to everyone. I will just ask that we blow it up, and I'm going to ask you to focus on the portion of the message that appears to be from Dylan Howard. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is the date of that email?
October 26th, 2016.
And the time?
8:23 p.m.
Can you please read us the body of the email?
Michael Keith. Next paragraph. Thank you for chatting with me earlier. Next paragraph. Confirming agreement on, and there are 3 bullet points, executed agreement hand-signed by Keith's client and returned via overnight for same-day FedEx to Michael. Next bullet point. Change agreement to reflect the correct LLC. And the final bullet point is transfer funds on Thursday a.m. to be held in escrow until receipt of agreement. Thank you both, Dylan.
And who is this email sent to by Dylan?
It's sent to Michael Cohen and I.
What is your understanding of what this email was about?
This email followed a conversation, a conference call between Dylan and I with Michael Cohen. That conversation took place because there was difficulty in communications with Michael Cohen, and I had lost trust in what he was telling me. And Dylan came in as the mediator and sort of mediated that meeting, and he followed up with this email.
What was the reason for losing trust with Michael Cohen?
I believed he was not telling me the truth.
About what?
The delays in the funding.
Okay, I now want to show you Exhibit 285 in evidence, and I'm going to blow it up and ask you, is this another email exchange between yourself and Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And what is the subject line of the email?
Wire on behalf of Essential Consultants, LLC.
And what is the date of this email?
October 27th, 2016.
And does it appear as though if you were going chronologically, it would start at the bottom and go up?
Yes.
What is the time of the first email?
6:47 a.m.
And is this, to be clear, is this document produced by you and retrieved from your service in California?
I don't know.
We can show you the Bates stamp and see if this helps you to answer the question.
Yes, it was produced by me pursuant to subpoena.
Okay, so now I am just going to ask you, what does the body of the first email in the chain from Michael Cohen to you say?
Keith, next paragraph. Kindly confirm that the wire received today, October 27th, 2016, shall be held in your attorney's trust account until such time as directed for release by me in writing. Next paragraph. Additionally, please ensure that all paperwork contains the correct name of Essential Consultants, LLC. Next paragraph. I thank you in advance for your assistance and look forward to hearing from you later. Next paragraph. Yours, Michael Cohen, Managing Member, Essential Consultants, LLC.
And did you respond?
Yes.
At what time?
7:02 p.m.
And how did you respond?
Damam, I confirm that I will work in good faith, and that no funds shall be disbursed, unless and until he personally signs all necessary settlement paperwork, parentheses, the form of which will match the prior agreement, end parentheses. The settlement docs will name the correct corporation, parentheses, Essential Consultants, LLC, end parentheses. Plaintiff's signature will be notarized and returned to you via FedEx. Next paragraph. Only after you receive the FedEx, I will disperse. Next paragraph. Fair.
So let me just ask you a quick question here. The draft of this agreement, I believe you testified, was exchanged between you and Michael Cohen back on October 11th of 2016.
The 10th or the 11th.
Okay, at that time, was the entity that Michael Cohen was using to fund this deal called Resolution Consultants?
Yes.
And at some point between then and the final documents, did the entity name change?
It did.
And what did it change to?
Essential Consultants, LLC.
I now want to pull back up Exhibit 176, which is in evidence, and display page 12, lines 536 to 537. Is this a part of that long series of texts between yourself and Dylan Howard?
Yes.
And are these two that we've blown up, what is the date on these texts?
October 27th, 2016.
What did the text say?
From Dylan Howard to me. Money wired, I am told.
Did you have an understanding as to who told Dylan Howard that the funds had been wired?
I assumed that it was Michael Cohen. He was the only other one involved.
And what about your response?
Funds received.
And did you, in fact, receive these funds as a wire from Essential Consultants on October 27th, 2016 into your escrow account?
Yes.
Turning to page 13, just to continue this text exchange, what, if anything, did Mr. Howard say?
Unbelievable.
And you?
Was never really sure.
And did Stormy Daniels have to re-sign the original settlement agreement and the side letter agreement now that the name of the entity that was funding the deal had been changed from Resolution Consultants to Essential Consultants?
She did.
I'm now showing you what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 276. Do you recognize these documents?
Yes.
What are they?
This looks to be the cover page, page 1, of the Confidential Settlement Agreement and Mutual Release Assignment of Copyright and Non-Disparagement Agreement between, relating to Stormy Daniels.
And whom?
Donald Trump.
And were you involved in drafting these agreements?
Yes.
Did the settlement agreement, the ultimate settlement agreement payment amount, remain $130,000 in this final version?
It did.
I want to display page 3 and blow up paragraph 3, 1D. And I'm just going to ask you to read that aloud and then tell us what it means, please.
You said you wanted me to read it.
Yes, please.
Aloud.
Please.
Paragraph D. PP shall not. Plaintiff shall not at any time from the date of this agreement forward, comma, directly or indirectly disclose or disseminate any of the property or any confidential information, parenthesis, including confirmation of the fact that it exists or ever existed, and or confirming any rumors as to any such existence, end parenthesis, to any party, as more fully provided herein.
Does it say to any third party?
Any third party.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That's essentially part of the non-disclosure aspect of the agreement.
And I believe you told us yesterday, is PP the pseudonym Peggy Peterson for Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
Okay. I want to turn to page 10 and blow up paragraph 5, 1.2. This is on page 9 of the settlement agreement. What? I'm not going to ask you to read this whole thing out loud. Can you just read it to yourself and let us know when you're done reading it? The question I'm going to ask you is what it means.
I'm familiar with it. I authored this paragraph.
Okay, so what does it mean?
It's the liquidated damages provision.
And does the liquidated damages provision continue on to the next page?
Yes.
Okay, I am just going to quickly show you that last page. What were the liquidated damages in this case?
The stated liquidated damages in this contract was $1 million.
And is that $1 million per breach?
Yes.
Was it unusual to have liquidated damages that were so much greater than the original payment under the NDA?
I believe that this paragraph, the way that it was drafted, was unenforceable. Yes.
You believe it was unenforceable. Why?
Because the liquidated damages provision would have no relation to the damages caused if there was a breach. The $1 million, there needs to be a rational relationship between the expected damages in the case of a breach of contract, and the liquidated damages provision are included in contracts where the expected damages, were there to be a breach, would be difficult to ascertain, and they should be reasonably related to the underlying amount of the contract. And here, a liquidated damages provision of $1 million, which was demanded by Michael Cohen, was so far in excess of the settlement amount of the contract that it really served no purpose.
And I believe you answered this, but who requested such large liquidated damages?
Michael Cohen.
Now, this paragraph that we have blown up refers to, can you remind us what the DD stands for again?
It's a pseudonym for the defendant.
And is that a party to this agreement?
Yes.
And who is the person who DD refers to?
Donald Trump.
Okay. I now want to display page 15, and let me know if you need us to blow this up, but I just want to ask you, Who is accepting service on behalf of DD, a.k.a. David Dennison, a.k.a. Donald Trump?
Essential Consultants, care of Michael Cohen, Esquire.
And turning to page 17 of the exhibit. Is this the first page of the finalized side letter agreement?
Yes.
And is the real name of David Dennison written in handwriting?
Yes.
Whose handwriting is that?
My handwriting.
Okay. Can we just zoom in on that, please? And what was the date that the side letter was entered into?
I would have to look at the signature block.
Okay. What is the date that is written in the original paragraph of the side letter written agreement?
October 28th, 2016.
Okay. Turning to the next page of the exhibit, page 18. And blowing up the second full paragraph, can you please read that out loud?
It is further agreed, neither party shall keep a copy of this document, and that only Keith M. Davidson, Esquire, and Michael D. Cohen, Esquire, counsel for the parties herein, shall maintain possession of it or access to this side letter agreement. And then in all caps, for avoidance of doubt, comma, the parties hereto agree and confirm that this side agreement is deemed, quote, attorney's eyes only, end quote.
And what did you understand that to mean?
That this document was sensitive, that neither party could maintain a copy of this side letter agreement, and that only Michael Cohen and I could possess a fully executed copy of it.
And to be clear, is this the document that decodes, I guess, the non-disclosure agreement between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump?
The settlement agreement and non-disclosure agreement, yes. This is the side letter agreement that decodes the underlying settlement agreement.
And I should clarify. When I say decode, I mean provides the real names of the parties to the settlement agreement?
True.
Okay, turning to the bottom, the next page. Oh no, just the bottom of this page. And I will just ask you, you signed the agreement?
I did sign the agreement.
Silly question, but where?
Above my name.
On the line above your name?
Yes.
Who signed on behalf of Peggy Peterson, /K/a Stephanie Gregory Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels?
She signed that herself.
And what was the date that she signed it?
October 28th, 2016.
What was the date that you signed it?
October 31st, 2016.
And who signed on behalf of Essential Consultants?
Michael Cohen.
And what date did he sign?
He wrote that he signed it on October 28th, 2016.
Did anyone ever, let me ask you this. Did you ever receive a version where there was a signature on the line for David Dennison's signature?
I did not.
Turning to page 19, which is the last page of the exhibit. What is this exhibit? What is this?
This is an assignment and transfer of copyright. It's an addendum to the settlement agreement.
And what does that mean?
Copyrights are details of an ownership of some sort of intellectual property, and as a result of the underlying contract, it called for a transfer of copyright in any materials that Stephanie Clifford owned an interest in, where she transferred that right to the other party in this agreement.
And if you could blow up the bottom here, did Stormy Daniels sign the agreement?
She did.
Where?
Above the line, her signature line, PP.
And what name did she use to sign it?
Stephanie Clifford.
Who signed the agreement on behalf of David Dennison?
Michael Cohen, Esquire.
And is that above the line? Is that the line that we have highlighted above the DD?
Yes.
Now, did he also place the initials EC for Essential Consultants at the bottom of the page over the line for DD?
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Davidson, how much money did you personally make for this deal?
$10,000.
Did there come a time when you dispersed the monies that you received in a wire from Michael Cohen on October 27th?
Yes.
And do you remember how much you dispersed to Stormy Daniels approximately?
I fear that invades attorney-client privilege. I dispersed everything other than my attorney fees.
So let me ask you this. Did you also, without invading attorney-client privilege, did you also disperse some of the money to Gina Rodriguez?
I dispersed everything pursuant to my client's directives, her net aspect of the settlement pursuant to her directive.
Okay, so directing your attention to November of 2016, did there come a time when the agreement between Karen McDougal and AMI became public?
Yes.
Do you remember how that happened?
Yes.
How?
Well, I should clarity.
Let me ask you that a different way. I don't want to ask you to invade any privilege. Was there an article that was published in a particular publication?
There was an article published in the Wall Street Journal that initially publicized the underlying contract between Karen McDougal and AMI.
Okay, I want to show you quickly People's 108 in evidence. It's in evidence so everybody can see it. Do you recognize this?
I do.
Is this the Wall Street Journal article that you referenced that broke the story about the deal between AMI and Karen McDougal?
It is.
And what is the date of this article?
November 4th, 2016.
After this article was published, or around the time the article was published, did you speak with Michael Cohen about it?
I did.
Once or more than once?
More than once.
What do you recall about those conversations?
That he was very upset.
Can you elaborate?
He was very upset that the article had been published. He was very upset about the timing of the article. He wanted to know who the source of the article was, why someone would be the source of this type of an article. He was very upset about the timing. He stated that his boss was very upset, and he threatened to sue Karen McDougal.
And when Michael Cohen said that his boss was very upset, who did you understand that to mean?
Donald Trump.
And when Michael Cohen complained about the timing of the article, what did you understand that to mean?
That it was in close proximity to the election of 2016.
As you sit here, do you remember the date of Election Day 2016?
It may have been the 6th, I'm not sure.
Okay. What is your recollection about Karen McDougal's whereabouts at the time that this article was published? If you can answer that without violating privilege?
Yeah, I don't know that I have. I don't know that I have an answer to that question.
Okay.
I don't recall.
So now I want to direct your attention back to People's Exhibit 176. And this might refresh your recollection as to the date of election night. From the context of this, of the text exchange, can you tell, and keeping in mind that this is in London time, UTC time, can you tell, does this refresh your recollection about when Election Day was in 2016?
November 9th.
I'm just reminding you about the UTC time. So I think you said you weren't 100% familiar with the relationship between UTC time and East Coast time. Is that true?
I don't have a particular knowledge of it.
Okay, and does in UTC time, was that text sent at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Okay, and the first text in this exchange is from Hughes, is that correct?
Yes.
And what did you say?
What have we done?
What did you mean by that, Mr. Davidson?
This is sort of gallows humor. It was on election night as the results were coming in, and there was sort of a surprise amongst the broadcasters and others that Donald Trump was leading in the polls, and that there was growing sense that folks were about ready to call the election.
And you referred to it as gallows humor. Can you explain that a little bit more? What did you mean when you say, what have we done?
I think that there was an understanding that this is a text between Dylan Howard and I, and that there was an understanding that our efforts may have in some way, I should strike that our activities may have in some way assisted the presidential campaign of Donald Trump.
And how did Dylan Howard respond to your text?
Oh my God.
After the election, I should ask you the obvious question. Who won the election?
Donald Trump.
After the election, did you continue to speak with Michael Cohen?
I did.
Did there come any times during the month or two that followed the election when the topic of the Stormy Daniels deal came up?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about that?
After the election, Misha Cohen called me fairly frequently. And there was one particular day, it was on a weekend in mid-December, and this is the period of time after the election. But before Donald Trump had been sworn in as president, and I think it was on Saturday morning, and I was shopping for the holiday, and I got a call from a very despondent and saddened Michael Cohen. And I was at a department store, which is kind of a whole another story because it was sort of strangely decorated. And so the whole situation was very odd, that he was calling me and I was in this strangely decorated department store. And it was a long phone call, and he had told me he was depressed and despondent, and he said that he used very colorful language about that stage of his life.
You are quoting, so you can repeat the language.
He said something to the effect of, Jesus Christ, can you fucking believe I'm not going to Washington? After everything I've done for that fucking guy, I can't believe I'm not going to Washington. I've saved that guy's ass so many times you don't even know.
And did?
And then.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And then he made reference to, he said, I never even got paid, he said. That fucking guy is not even paying me the $130,000 back.
And what did you interpret that to mean, that last part?
That he was not getting repaid the $130,000.
And do you remember when that conversation took place?
It was sometime in mid-December.
I'm going to show you privately a document, and obviously show counsel in the court as well. And I'm going to ask you if this is a receipt from the store that you were shopping in from the time that you got the call from Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And does that refresh your recollection as to the day you had this particular conversation with Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And we can take that down, thank you. What was that day?
December 9th.
And I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but how was the store decorated?
It was this store, I think, that has, I don't know if it's even still in business, but it was a store called it was a warehouse store, like a big box store. And it was decorated like Alice in Wonderland, and so you felt very small in it. And there were these huge rabbits and a cat in the hat on the ceiling and things like that. It was just a very odd feeling.
Okay. So going back to the period of time between the election and the inauguration, during that period, did you communicate with Michael Cohen on multiple occasions?
Yes.
Did you use phone, text, encrypted apps, or all of the above?
All of the above.
I am now showing you what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 286, and it can be shown to everyone. It's in evidence. And I'm going to direct your attention, I guess, to early 2018 now. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
And can you explain to the jury what it is, please?
I had received a comment call, which is when the press is about to publish an article. And I had received a request for comment from the Wall Street Journal in 2018, and shortly before this email, and they wanted a comment on any interactions regarding Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump.
And so, just to clarify, you received an inquiry from the Wall Street Journal that led you to believe that they were getting ready to publish an article about the contact between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump?
Yes.
And this was how you responded?
Yes.
And tell us how you responded, please. Just read it for us.
Nothing about the present-day regurgitation of these rumors causes us to rethink our prior denial issued in 2011.
And did you write that to the Wall Street Journal reporter?
I did.
On what day?
January 10th, 2018.
And what did you mean when you said our prior denial issued in 2011? What was that a reference to?
The cease and desist demand letter that was sent to thedirty.com in 2011.
And did you forward your response to the Wall Street Journal reporter to anyone?
To Michael Cohen. Yes, to Michael Cohen.
And why did you do that?
Because we had a mutuality of interest at this period.
Can you explain that a little bit to the jury?
Well, we had a fully executed settlement agreement and confidentiality agreement. And now the underlying matter that was the subject of that settlement agreement, confidentiality agreement, was about to be published. And I think I had a contractual duty to let him know that something was about to be published. And we were acting in unison to address it.
Okay, so I want to now show you what has been marked for identification as People's Exhibit. Privately, please, thank you. What has been marked for identification as People's Exhibit 255. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
What is it?
I believe that it's a database of messaging between Michael Cohen and I.
And are these instant messages back and forth between yourself and Michael Cohen during this period in January and perhaps in February of 2018?
Yes.
Do you remember sending and receiving these texts?
For the most part, yes.
And do they pertain to your conversations with Michael Cohen at or around the time that the details of the Stormy Daniels payoff became public?
The Stormy Daniels settlement.
The Stormy Daniels settlement, yes?
Yes.
And are they exact copies of your instant messages back and forth between Michael Cohen, to the best of your recollection?
Yes.
And do the date and timestamps appear to be accurate to the best of your recollection?
Yes.
I offer them into evidence, or I offer this exhibit into evidence.
No objection.
Accepted into evidence.
Thank you. And I'm now displaying publicly People's Exhibit 255, starting on page 1, and I'm going to ask that we blow up thank you lines 1 and 2, in kind of the way we did with the Exhibit 176. I'm just going to ask you to read some of these texts back and forth and explain what they mean, and give us the date when appropriate. So starting with this top one, what is the date of these blown up texts?
January 10th, 2018.
And who is that first one from, and who is it to?
From me to Michael Cohen.
And what is the body of the text or instant message?
You know, when I look at this, I think earlier I testified that email that I sent to the Wall Street Journal, they called me for a comment. Now that I read this, it makes me think that maybe they called her for comment, and I responded on her behalf, for whatever that's worth.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks.
You can proceed, please.
Okay. WSJ, the Wall Street Journal, called Stormy. She didn't answer. They say they are running a story and have a deadline of tonight for her comment. Tonight for her to comment.
Thank you. And how did Michael Cohen respond to that?
Write a strong denial for her like you did before.
And what did you understand that to mean?
Like I understood that he wanted me to write a strong denial comment for her.
A denial of what?
Everything.
Including the sexual encounter with Donald Trump?
Yes.
So without revealing privileged communications, did you send a denial to Stormy Daniels for her to sign?
I don't recall.
Okay, take a look, please, at People's Exhibit 277 in evidence. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
What is it?
This is a statement from Stormy Daniels dated January 10th, 2018.
And did you prepare this statement?
I believe so.
Can you read it to us, please?
January 10th, 2018. To whom it may concern. I recently became aware that certain news outlets are alleging that I had a sexual and/or romantic affair with Donald Trump many years ago. I am stating with complete clarity that this is absolutely false. My involvement with Donald Trump was limited to a few public appearances and nothing more. When I met Donald Trump, he was gracious, professional, and a complete gentleman to me and everyone in my presence. Rumors that I have received hush money from Donald Trump are completely false. If indeed I did have a relationship with Donald Trump, trust me, you wouldn't be reading about it in the news. You would be reading about it in my book. But the fact of the matter is these stories are not true. Stormy Daniels.
How would you characterize, Mr. Davidson, the truthfulness of this statement?
Well, I think that this is a tactic that is oftentimes used in the cat and mouse interactions between publicists and attorneys and the press, and that an extremely strict reading of this denial would technically be true.
Can you explain that? How is this technically true?
Well, I think you have to go through it word by word, and it would if you did so. I think it would technically be true with an extremely fine reading of it.
So let me direct you to two parts in particular. The first two sentences, when it states that Ms. Daniels was contacted by certain news outlets alleging that she had a sexual and/or romantic affair with Donald Trump many, many, many years ago, and then it states that that's absolutely false. How is that technically correct?
Well, I think you would have to hone in on the definition of romantic, sexual, and affair.
Okay, can you explain that?
Well, I don't think that anyone had ever alleged that any interaction between she and Mr. Trump was romantic.
Okay, how about sexual?
Well, that would be a sexual and/or romantic.
Okay, so let me just zoom out for a second and say, did you understand this statement to be cleverly misleading?
I don't understand the question.
Did you understand at the time that you wrote this letter that Stormy Daniels had, in fact, had a sexual encounter with Donald Trump at some point?
That was my understanding.
Okay, so I want to direct your attention to the first line of the second paragraph. Rumors that I received hush money from Donald Trump are completely false. Okay.
Yes.
How is that technically true?
Well, it's really no different than our interaction a few minutes ago where you called it a payoff.
Okay.
It wasn't a payoff and it wasn't hush money. It was consideration in a civil settlement agreement.
Can you just explain that a little bit more of what consideration is for, what you mean when you say a consideration?
Well, I think in the simplest of examples, a consideration is money or something of value that's exchanged in a contract. I will pay you $5 if you mow my lawn. The $5 will be a consideration.
So do I understand you correctly to be saying that you don't think the term hush money accurately describes the exchange of money that was paid to Stormy Daniels by Donald Trump?
Can you please restate that?
Yeah. Do I understand you? Withdrawn? Would you use the phrase hush money to describe the money that was paid to your client by Donald Trump?
I would never use that word.
And what would be the word that you would use to describe it?
Consideration.
Okay, I now want to ask you if you sent a copy of this document to Michael Cohen.
I did.
All right, I now want to move on and show you more of what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 255. Is that a series of text exchanges from January 2018 with Michael Cohen? And particularly, I want to direct your attention to page 2, entry 19, and ask you what is being said and by whom and when.
This is January 17th, 2018, from Michael Cohen to me. I have her tentatively scheduled for Hannity tonight. Call me after your trial.
Now, can you tell us what you understood that to mean, please, Mr. Davidson?
I understood this to mean that he had her Stormy Daniels, tentatively scheduled to appear on the television show Hannity that night.
Do you know for what purpose?
No.
So you understood this to mean to be saying for Michael Cohen to be as stating that he had scheduled your client to appear on Hannity that night?
Yes.
And did your client actually appear on Hannity that night?
No.
Have you previously examined this text exchange?
I have previously seen it.
Are there a series of texts about whether or not she should appear and when on Hannity that followed this?
I think, and preceded it. But this was sort of in one of Michael Cohen's pants on fire stages where he was sort of frantically trying to address the fact that Stormy's story had percolated into public consumption, and he was frantic. I was in a trial, and which is fairly all-consuming, and it was just many phone calls and many text messages with little regard for my schedule.
Did you have any understanding of how having your client appear on Hannity would help Michael Cohen? Why he was pushing for that?
A few minutes ago, we request for me to write a strong denial the way that I did way back then. And what he was referring to, I think, was the letter that I sent to the Dirty in 2011. But there was no denial in the cease and desist demand that I sent to the Dirty in 2011. And that as a fact was just wrong. And then I sent him the exhibit that we just looked at, which was sort of that carefully worded denial. And I believe that he thought that Michael Cohen, thought that Stormy going on Hannity, which would somehow help him and his client. I believe that I had an understanding that he believed that she would further deny the interaction.
Okay, moving on to another text that I want to bring to your attention. And this is the one beginning Keith the Wise Man, okay? What was the date that this text was sent, and who was it sent from, and who was it sent to?
It was January 17th, 2018, from Michael Cohen to me.
And what does it say?
Keith, the wise men all believe the story is dying and don't think it's smart for her to do any interviews. Period. Let her do her thing, but no interviews at all with anyone.
And did you respond? I think we need to blow up one more text here.
100%.
Can we have them together, please? Okay. Mr. Davidson, what did you understand Michael Cohen's text to mean when he said, the wise men all believe the story is dying and she shouldn't do any interviews?
Again, that this was sort of in one of his pants on fire stages, and that he was running around planning things. And then when he ran it up the flagpole or consulted someone or some group, whoever wise men are, that they didn't think that it was a good idea for her to actually appear on Hannity.
And to your knowledge, did she appear on Hannity?
She never appeared on Hannity, to my knowledge.
Okay. And just turning your attention to the next page, continuing this same exchange, how does, after you say 100%, how does Michael Cohen respond?
Thanks, pal.
And does he send a follow-up text after that?
Yes.
And what does he say?
Just no interviews or statements unless through you.
And what did you understand that to mean?
That it was his request that I manage the communications for her.
Her being Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you respond?
Got it.
Showing you some more of this exchange on page 7, lines 64 through 73. And again, I will just ask you to kind of walk us through who sends which texts, when, and what they mean. Starting, and maybe we can zoom in a little bit, starting with, and she's 64.
So you would just like me to read it?
Well, I would like you to tell us the date, who is from, who is it to, and then, yes, please read.
Okay. January 24th, 2018, from me to Michael Cohen. Spoke to her, meaning Stormy. Everything is as we discussed. She steadfastly refuses to speak about the past.
And what did Michael Cohen say?
January 25th, 2018. We will see because it airs tonight.
And did he then send another text that same day?
I think it might be the next day, the 26th.
Oh, it's a little small for me to read from here. Thank you. The 26th. Yes, please?
From Michael Cohen to me. Why is she going on Kimmel after the SOTU?
Do you have an understanding of what SOTU meant?
Yes.
What?
State of the Union Address.
And does that particular text from Michael Cohen stand out to you for any reason?
No.
Okay, how did you respond, if at all?
I responded very shortly thereafter. IDK, I don't know. I was pissed. She said this is her shot. I'm not meeting with her this weekend to prep her. Prep her and... I would like to start over.
Sure.
IDK. I don't know. I was pissed. She said this is her shot. I'm meeting with her this weekend to prep her and get the statement.
What statement were you trying to get?
He had asked at this moment in time I was in a very difficult situation, and I think Stormy was in a very difficult situation. She had that lengthy settlement agreement, which called for penalties if she breached the non-disparagement. She would have to give back any profits that she made. She would have to return the consideration, the $130,000, and she may have to pay, if it was enforceable, the liquidated damage clause. And so we have Cohen saying, and what I understood him saying, let her do her thing, just don't talk about the past. And Stormy saying, this was her shot. She wanted to talk about her life and reinvigorate her career. So this was a conversation about Stormy Daniels going on the late night show with Jimmy Kimmel.
Okay, so continue on to the next page, page 8, entries 74 to 75. Again, I will just ask you to give us, the same way you have been doing, the date and who is texting who and what is being said.
This is a text from Michael to me on January 30th, 2018. It is out.
Can we just blow this up a little bit more or zoom in a little bit more? And what are these series of, you don't have to read every single one of these. What are these texts about? And did you already tell us the date of these?
January 30th.
So what are you texting about at this point?
Apparently there was a news article that had been published. I was receiving hundreds of phone calls at my office.
Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. Do you see the text that is, it looks like it's on January 30th, 2018 at 5 hours, 49 minutes and 59 seconds p.m.?
Yes.
And who is that from?
From me to Michael Cohen.
And what is the body of the text?
She is stating that she authorized it and she released it of her own volition.
And what did you understand that to mean, or what did you mean when you wrote that, I should say?
That's Michael Cohen had requested yet another statement from Stormy Daniels, and that on the day of, that she was appearing on Jimmy Kimmel, and he wanted to know whether or not she was going to release it.
Okay, I want to show you page 9, just to continue this, of the same exhibit, lines 86 through 87. And again, I would just ask you to tell us who is texting who, when, and what it means.
This is January 30th, 2018, from me to Michael Cohen. Quote, she's good for now. but it's a shitload of work.
But what did you mean by that? What was a lot of work?
Just this case had begun to eat up a lot of time.
And how did Michael Cohen respond?
I'm sorry, but thank you.
And so you just referenced another statement. Did you, in fact, prepare another denial for her to sign immediately prior to her appearance on Jimmy Kimmel?
There was another statement that was prepared and released.
Okay, let me show you People's Exhibit 278. This is in evidence. I will ask that we blow it up a little bit. And I will ask you, is this the statement of denial from January 30th, 2018?
Yes.
And did withdrawn. Who typed this document?
I did.
And where were you when you did that?
I was in the Marilyn Monroe suite at the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood, California.
And who else was present?
There were makeup artists. To my recollection, there were makeup artists and hairdressers. There was Gina Rodriguez was there. Her then-boyfriend Anthony was there. Stormy was there. I was there. Think that's it.
And where in relation did withdrawn? Did you say why you were in that room in the hotel? What was happening? Why was hair and makeup there?
The Roosevelt Hotel is a classic old Hollywood place on Hollywood Boulevard, where they have the Hollywood Walk of Fame and the stars. And it's right next to where Kimmel Films and the Jimmy Kimmel Show had put Stormy up at the Roosevelt Hotel and specifically requested that suite. And I think she was preparing to go on Kimmel that night.
Okay, can you read for us the statement?
To whom it may concern. Next paragraph. Over the past few weeks, I have been asked countless times to comment on reports of an alleged sexual relationship that I had with Donald Trump many years ago. Next paragraph. The fact of the matter is that each party to this alleged affair denied its existence in 2006, 2011, 2016, 2017, and now again in 2018. I'm not denying this affair because I was paid hush money, as has been reported in overseas-owned tabloids. I am denying this affair because it never happened. Period. Next paragraph. I will have no further comment on this matter. Period. Please feel free to check me out on Instagram at the Stormy Daniels. At the Stormy Daniels.
Mr. Davidson, how would you characterize truthfulness of this statement?
I think it's technically true.
Can you explain that? Can you explain how it's true that it says an alleged sexual relationship, which basically denies them having a sexual relationship? Is that right?
Yes.
And how is that technically true?
Because I don't think that anyone had ever alleged that there was a relationship between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump. I believe their relationship is an ongoing interaction.
And it also makes a reference, withdrawn. It denies that Stormy Daniels was paid hush money. If I asked you to explain that, would you give basically the same answer that you gave in connection with the denial from January 10th of 2018?
It would.
Okay, I want to go back to your exchange with Michael Cohen on People's Exhibit 255, directing your attention in particular to page 9, starting with entries 88 to 97. Starting with the top, can you give us the time, please, and the date?
The date is, they are all January 31st, 2018. It starts at 12:21 a.m., from Michael Cohen to me.
And is that 12:21 a.m. UTC minus 5?
I don't know.
Does it say UTC minus 5?
It does.
Okay, but you don't know what that means, is that right?
Well, I could figure it out, but...
Well, I don't want you to guess.
All right.
If you're not sure.
I don't know.
Okay, so who was the first text from in this particular exchange?
She just denied the letter. This is from Michael Cohen to me.
Okay, and what did you understand it to mean?
Well, I took it to mean that he was watching Stormy Daniels on Kimmel, and that he was reporting to me what was being broadcast.
So who do you understand she to be in reference to?
Stormy Daniels.
What is the next text in this chain, from whom to whom?
From Michael Cohen to me, claiming it's not her signature.
Keep going, please.
You said she did it in front of you.
I should just ask, this series of texts that's up on the screen, are these sent within fairly rapid succession, all within a 5-minute window?
Yes.
And I believe you testified that you understood this to be happening while Michael Cohen was watching Stormy Daniels appearing on the Kimmel Show, correct?
Yes.
So what do you understand it to mean when Michael Cohen said to you, you said she did it in front of you?
That he was repeating something I had previously told him, which is that most recent statement was signed in front of me.
The one that was signed in the Roosevelt Hotel?
That's right.
So then did you respond to Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And what did you say?
She did. Period. Impossible. She posted it on her own Twitter page.
How did Michael Cohen respond?
They showed her signature and she claimed it was not hers on Kimmel.
Did you respond in any way?
WTF.
I hate to ask, what does that mean?
It's a signal of exasperation of, what the fuck? I didn't watch Kimmel, so I was getting all this information, but I wasn't watching the show.
Got it. Scrolling down to page 11, lines 112 to 113. I should ask before I blow this up in the interim, is there some back and forth about Stormy Daniels' appearance on Kimmel?
Yes.
So now going to lines 112 and 113 on page 11, I'm going to ask you what time this text was sent and by whom.
January 31st, 2018 at 1:30 UTC. From Michael to me, please tell Gina to ensure she responds the same as your statement tomorrow when she does The View. That television show. This is not a comedy show. Exclamation point.
What did you understand that to mean?
That Michael was upset about what he understood was Stormy denying that she had signed the statement.
Before we move on, I believe you testified this was but does it actually say UTC -5?
Yes.
Shortly thereafter, did you respond to Michael Cohen?
Yes.
What did you say?
Gina is ticked off at Stormy because Stormy made her look like a liar. Gina says she is going to have a long talk with Stormy on the plane to New York tomorrow. She assured me that this will get handled. Apparently, they were going to New York to film The View.
What were you saying to Michael Cohen here? What did you mean?
Well, again, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to thread a needle and hold off allegations of breach and all the penalties that would come with that. Where Cohen would, file an arbitration or sue Stormy. And that would be a whole nother disaster. So we're trying to placate him while also trying to meet Stormy's desires.
And without getting into any privileged communications between yourself and Stormy Daniels, did Michael Cohen threaten a lawsuit against Stormy Daniels?
Many times.
Can you tell us basically what he said about that?
He can be a very aggressive guy. Aggressive in his pursuits to protect his client. And he would oftentimes, make legal threats. Say that he would bankrupt her and, rain legal hell down upon her. And don't fuck with us. You don't know who you're fucking with, things like that.
And what did you, if you had an understanding, what did you understand Michael Cohen to be attempting to get you to do?
I don't understand your question.
Okay, regarding Stormy Daniels' story, did you have an understanding about what Michael Cohen wanted you to do regarding Stormy Daniels and her story?
Well, he wants to hear her deny her story to protect his client.
That's what I was asking. Okay, going back to this, excuse me one second. Going back to People's 255, your text exchange with Michael Cohen, and turning to page 12, lines 122 to 123. I'm sorry, 122 to 133. I'll just ask you to blow it up a little bit. You don't have to read every single one of these, but could you read them to yourself and tell us a little bit about what's happening here?
No.
You want me to keep going? Let's scroll down a little bit more. Let me stop right there for a second and direct you to the text that appears to be on February 13th, 2018 at 10:30 p.m. UTC -5 time, okay?
Okay.
It says Michael Cohen appeared to text you a particular email address.
Yes.
Whose email address does he text you?
Christopher Cuomo.
Who did you understand Christopher Cuomo to be?
He's a news broadcaster, then with CNN.
Okay, scrolling down a little bit, did you see the text that's sent about 11:55 p.m. from Michael Cohen?
Yes.
What is he saying?
The first one is, yes. Second one is, can you send me the statement?
Yes, and what did you say?
I am sending you this draft because it is truthful. What do you think? I represented Stephanie Clifford in the Cohen/Stephanie Clifford transaction. I read today that Michael Cohen reports that the source of the $130,000 paid to Ms. Clifford was from his own personal funds. Period. That assertion is in complete harmony with what he informed me of at the time of the transaction.
And did Michael Cohen respond?
Yes.
What did he say?
Perfect. Send to Cuomo.
What's going on here, Mr. Davidson?
I don't know. I think that he was under some fire, and wanted validation or corroboration that the $130,000 was in fact paid from him and not paid from anyone else.
And did he ask you to write a statement to that effect to send to Christopher Cuomo?
Yes.
And did you share it with Michael Cohen before sending it to Christopher Cuomo?
I did.
And did you ultimately send it to Christopher Cuomo?
I did. I recall that I did. I believe I did.
How would you characterize the truthfulness of this statement?
I believe it's truthful.
Did you told us yesterday that you believe that the ultimate source of the funds was Donald Trump? Is that correct?
Yes.
So how do you reconcile those two? How do you reconcile that with the statement?
The going back and forth in the days before that, this Stormy Daniels-Michael Cohen deal was consummated in October 2016. And if you recall, there was a period where he said, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. That's what I was referring to in the statement.
So the statement does not undermine your belief that the ultimate source of the funds was Donald Trump.
At the time of the transaction.
Can you just clarify that for a second?
At the time of the transaction, Michael Cohen told me, as the statement said, at the time of the transaction, Michael Cohen told me, "Fuck it, I'll just do it myself."
Okay, so, all right, I understand. Thank you. My next question is, did you, directing your attention, I guess, to early April of 2018, did you go on CNN and say that Michael Cohen used his own funds to pay Stormy Daniels?
I believe so.
And why did you say that?
Because I understood that he did.
Based on the same statement that he made at the time of the transaction?
And even later on, that December 9th conversation that I had with him at the department store where he said that he had not been reimbursed.
Okay. One more moment, please. Mr. Davidson, do you have any stake in the outcome of this trial?
No, not at all.
No further questions.
Thank you.